It begins in 1861. I have just inherited the throne of the Netherlands. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 601, The Siege of Paris. In the Berlin Palace, when William IV expressed his concerns about the fall of Napoleon III, William I could not help but ask William IV what he was worried about. William IV's face was unprecedentedly solemn and said, "After the catastrophe of 1848, Paris rose again 20 years later. There were many remnants of those evil people. Your Excellency was also a person who personally experienced that era. In other words, I remember that His Majesty William I came to power and inherited the throne of Prussia after the catastrophe of 1849. The horror of that catastrophe to the European royal family and nobles, I think your Majesty still remembers it clearly." William I's eyes suddenly widened. The final result of the catastrophe in 1848 was that the French Empire became the Second French Republic, the power of the aristocracy was severely suppressed, and the capitalists rose. It was not until 1853 that Napoleon III, as the president, suppressed his opponents and ascended the throne to become the second emperor of the Napoleon family, and then there was the life of the Second French Empire for 16 years. Bismarck's expression also changed drastically as he looked at William IV. He knew what William IV meant. William IV warned, if Prussia drives Napoleon III away, then these remnants of 1848 will rise again. At that time, France will be under their rule, and its influence may continue to spread. No one knows whether the old revolution of 1848 will be staged again, but the probability is still very high. After all, there are many people in each country who are hostile to the aristocracy, especially those at the bottom of society who are most easily instigated. William IV stared at William I. The Netherlands has prepared for this many years ago. We have been developing Australia and the Dutch East Indies with large-scale construction projects just to find a piece of pure land for the Netherlands. We are almost done now." As he said, he turned around and stared at Prime Minister Bismarck, who was attacking from the opposite side, and snorted, "The attitude of the Netherlands towards East Oman is that if we gain it, we are lucky, but if we lose it, we will die. However, if Prussia thinks that the Netherlands can be bullied, it can be regarded as a good lesson for us. I think this is also a big gain for the Netherlands. Prime Minister Bismarck, you should not object, right?" Facing Bismarck's sharp gaze, William IV responded without blinking. Including William I, everyone chose to remain silent. After a long time, Bismarck said, "I think your Majesty is right. The French Empire cannot be killed with one blow. Napoleon III should be left a way out. Of course, we will ask the French Empire to retreat in East Oman. Prussia will fulfill its promise. However, Prussia is also very interested in Dutch submarines. William IV, we are willing to help Prussia build 10 ships." When he saw Bismarck was about to speak, he smiled bitterly and said, "The British Empire is keeping a close eye on this aspect. For this reason, we have ranked the British Empire submarines at the forefront, and the number is also the largest." William I and Bismarck were speechless when they heard this. However, they had long experienced the tyranny of Britain, so it was not surprising. The dispute over East Oman finally came to an end. This is just an issue. William IV and William I then began to discuss other issues between the two countries. When William IV left Berlin and returned westward through most of Prussia on November 20, 1869, Prussia once again launched a siege against Napoleon II's Reims. On November 23, 1869, the remaining main forces of the Metz Corps, the temporary commander of the 4th and 5th Armies, l'Admirault, were defeated in Chaumont, and the 40,000 remaining troops were annihilated by the Second Army of Crown Prince Frederick and Prince Karl of Prussia. On November 25, 1869, the Reims garrison where Napoleon III was located was also under the attack of Prussian artillery fire. Napoleon III formally led 83,000 officers and soldiers of the Prussian army to surrender to the Prussian army. In this battle, the French army lost more than 67,000 people, and the Prussian army only lost 19,000 people. After the news came out, the world was shocked again. Reims, the guardian of the eastern part of Paris, was actually broken, and Chaumont in the south was also occupied by others. Now, Paris has become a favorite place to face the Prussian army directly. William IV, who had already arrived at the Prussian kingdom of Hanover on his way back, fell silent after hearing the news. The people around William IV were also shocked. Nicholas Pearson said, "I was right. Bismarck will definitely take down Napoleon III directly. Instead of facing an opponent who can arouse the unity of the French Empire, it is better to let a group of unknown bourgeoisie come to power. Your Majesty, it seems that Bismarck and His Majesty William I are determined to replace the French Empire." William IV nodded, then pointed out the mistakes of the French side in this war and said, "In this battle, Napoleon II's side made 3 mistakes that led to Napoleon II's disastrous defeat. The first is the position stated by the French army when meeting the enemy's attack. It allowed the victorious Prussian army to enter the scattered French armies. As a result, the 2 independent French armies of Gleevec were separated, making it impossible for them to meet each other or even cooperate in combat. The second is that Bazaine's Rhine Corps hesitated in Metz, and as a result, it was only besieged in Lorraine and other places, losing mobile troops in vain and hurting itself. Third, all the troops supporting Bazaine and the routes they followed were simply instigating the enemy to capture all the reinforcements." William IV said this sarcastically. The reason is not only the wrong strategic guidance of the Paris government, but also the mistakes of the highest commander on the front line. First, when the French army was defeated in the first battle on the border and decided to retreat, and the Paris government did not allow the main Rhine army to retreat, MacMahon, as the commander of the French army, should have judged the situation and led his troops to the Rhine army column from the overall perspective of the war to cooperate in the battle. In this way, the Rhine army might avoid being surrounded by the Prussian army. However, this army mechanically moved closer to the Challenge army alone, which provided the Prussian army with an opportunity to split the entire French army into 2 parts and then defeat them one by one. He further pointed out, secondly, if it were not for the occupation and Napoleon II's procrastination, the tens of thousands of troops who retreated to shore could have overcome the obstruction of the Paris government and safely retreated to the Challenge area before being surrounded. However, they were hesitant and still wanted to make a hopeless defense of the Metz fortress. As a result, the Prussian army blocked their retreat. After being surrounded for no reason, they faced General Bazaine's passive waiting for reinforcements and his lack of active organization for a breakout. This became a knot in a vicious circle, which became tighter and tighter, and finally brought Napoleon III himself and the Paris government into it. William IV said this and suddenly laughed. However, isn't the Prussian army's attack on Paris the result we want to see? Cantor, director of the Netherlands National Security Council and coordinator of Atlantic Affairs, said, "Who would have thought that His Majesty was actually playing a big game? In fact, Prussia and other countries are just objects used by His Majesty. His Majesty's ultimate goal is the British Empire." The other people were shocked when they heard this, including Nicholas Pearson, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, who was hailed as the new trump card of Dutch diplomacy. "It turned out that everything was calculated by Your Majesty?" William IV said proudly, "The Netherlands' advantage in the next few decades will be on the sea, so we naturally need to break the British arrogance and recognize the rise of the Netherlands. This is the basis for us to use this Franco-Prussian War to establish a stable life for the Netherlands. The Franco-Prussian War is our most important weapon to pry the British recognition." Chapter 602, France's North-South Structure. Time goes back 2 days. On November 23, 1869, the Prussian 1st and 2nd Corps swept from the east, south and north to the west, and surrounded the entire Reims where Napoleon III was. They used cannons to bombard. Seeing that the situation was not good, Napoleon III immediately backed down. He handed the Marshal's seal to General Bourbaki, the commander of the French Royal Guard, and prepared to flee westward in a carriage. On November 24, the remaining main force of the Metz Corps in Chaumont, the temporary commander of the 4th and 5th Corps, Ladmiro, was surrounded by the Prussian army in the isolated fortress of Chaumont and was unable to resist. Seeing that the situation was not good, Napoleon III fled to the west in the direction of Paris with 100,000 troops, but less than 10 minutes after leaving Reims, they encountered the 150,000 Prussian troops of the 2nd Corps of Prince Karl of the Prussian army. At this time, he had to retreat to Reims, so he could only watch the Prussian 2nd and 3rd Corps, except Prince Karl, gather towards Reims. On November 25, 1869, the Battle of Reims began. 700 Prussian cannons bombarded the Reims military camp, and shells rained down on the French positions. The whole city of Reims was a sea of fire and smoke. Napoleon II's hundreds of thousands of French soldiers were killed and wounded, and the rest hurried into the fortress. Napoleon III took the lead and tried to boost morale, but was also injured several times. Then more than 250,000 Prussian troops launched a fierce attack on Reims. At 3 p.m., the French army finally couldn't hold on and raised the white flag in Reims. At this time, Napoleon III knew what kind of ending he would face. So at 5 p.m. in 1869, Napoleon III wrote a letter of surrender to King William I of Prussia with a heavy heart and stiff hands. However, what he didn't know at this time was that this letter of surrender would become his fig leaf. What Napoleon III didn't expect was that night, telegraph machines of major newspapers around the world received telegrams from the Prussian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which contained the content of Napoleon II's surrender. My dear brother, since I was not in my army, I had to offer my glimpse to your majesty. I hope to continue to be your majesty's good brother, Napoleon. However, at this time, Napoleon III didn't care so much. On November 26, 1869, Napoleon III went to Verdun occupied by the Prussian army to meet with Prussian Prime Minister Bismarck, who arrived there, and formally signed the surrender. Napoleon III and his 39 generals and 110,000 soldiers were all prisoners of the Prussian army. 650 French cannons were also captured by the Prussian army. On November 27, 1869, Napoleon III sent a telegram to Paris in front of Bismarck in Verdun. The content of the telegram was, "The Eastern Army has been defeated, all officers and soldiers and I have been taken prisoner." On November 27, 1869, when Napoleon II's telegram was reprinted by various countries, William IV, who was on his way back, arrived in Bielefeld, a city in the eastern part of North Rhine-Westphalia in the western part of the Kingdom of Prussia. North Rhine-Westphalia used to be the province of Gelderland in the eastern part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. As long as he walked out of North Rhine, William IV's return journey would be completed. It happened that at this time, the telegrams of Napoleon II's capture and surrender were sent out, which shocked the world. William IV sharply pointed out and criticized Napoleon II's failure. If Napoleon III did not want to sacrifice the entire French Empire to the invaders, and did not want to be trapped in a battle that would soon force him to surrender, he should have retreated from Metz immediately at the beginning of the war. Then, his command remained in place and he missed many opportunities to turn the tables. Secondly, more directly, McMahon violated the basic principles of being a scumbag and chose the wrong route of detoring through the border city of Sedan to rescue Lorraine and Alsace. Based on the actual situation on the battlefield at that time, for McMahon, the shortest, fastest and most reliable route to Lorraine was to go directly through the Prussian Third Army. Of course, doing so requires a keen strategic vision and the courage and determination to defeat a strong enemy, but McMahon lacked the necessary qualities in both aspects, so he had to take the road of Sedan to be annihilated. Sedan is a tiny place, only 8 kilometers away from the Belgian border in the north, and a large river, the Meuse River, in the west and southwest. During the battle, more than 100,000 French troops were squeezed into an arc-shaped area with a depth in front of only 3 or 4 kilometers under the attack of the Prussian army. They could not maneuver and it was difficult to deploy properly. In this way, the losses caused by the Prussian army's concentrated artillery bombardment of hundreds of artillery were enough to make the French army unable to support it and eventually destroyed. Napoleon III hid in Reims and did not learn his lesson. He also used McMahon's combat method, making Reims no better than Sedan now. Nicholas Pearson, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands, could no longer remain calm at this time. He said in shock, "Your Majesty, Bismarck actually treated His Majesty Napoleon III in the same way as a humiliation. The situation in Paris will definitely roll up huge waves. The negative impact of the situation in France on the Netherlands may have a spillover effect. I am afraid that the Netherlands will be affected by then." Cantor, Director of the National Security Council of the Netherlands and Coordinator of Atlantic Affairs, shook his head and said, "Don't worry. What we need to worry about more is how much power the aristocracy can still control in the power struggle in France." Nicholas Pearson looked at Cantor in confusion. As the head of William IV's most important think tank in the past 10 years, Cantor led William IV's brain team. It can be said that many of His Majesty William IV's instructions were discussed and formulated by them, and His Majesty began to communicate with the cabinet government and the military. Cantor's influence is evident. Moreover, Everyone has seen the prosperity of the Netherlands in the past 10 years, and his think tank has made an indelible contribution. No one will underestimate the #1 chief of staff around the king, who has decision-making power. After getting William IV's nod, Cantor revealed a shocking truth. It turned out that due to the extremely unbalanced domestic development of the French Empire in recent years, the aristocratic forces and the bourgeoisie forces had fought many times. Look at the current war between France and Prussia. The south is almost calm, but the north is in full swing. It turned out that the capitalists in the south had been sitting back and watching Napoleon II's military action since the beginning of the Franco-Prussian War. At this time, the internal politics of France's enemy country was being squeezed by two major forces. Cantor said, to the west of the entire oblique straight line with Saint-Quentin, Paris, Bourges, Orleans, Châteauroux, Poitiers, Niort, La Rochelle, there are regions including Napoleon II and Queen Eugenie. From Chalons, Châteauroux, Poitiers, Niort, La Rochelle to the south, it is now controlled by various factions in France. Chapter 603-2 Francis? Napoleon III, as the emperor of a country, was captured by his opponent. This is a huge shame for the great French Empire. Facing such a monarch who brings shame to the French Empire, how can we recognize him as our national monarch? For this reason, on behalf of Marseilles and even more on behalf of the Bouches-du-Rhône province, I no longer recognize the royal status of the Napoleon family, nor do I recognize Napoleon III as the monarch of our Bouches-du-Rhône province. The July Revolution in 1830 overthrew the Bourbon Restoration dynasty, declared Louis Philippe, Duke of Orleans as king, and the financial bourgeoisie took power. On December 1, 1869, Adolphe Thiers, a former cabinet minister, 1832, former prime minister, 1834 to 1836, and former foreign minister, 1840, who assisted Louis Philippe, Duke of Orleans, in overthrowing the Bourbon Restoration dynasty of the descendants of Napoleon I in 1830 and supported the establishment of the French July dynasty, and now a member of the Constitutional Assembly and the National Assembly, announced in his hometown, Marseilles in the south of the French Empire, that he would no longer recognize the monarchy of Napoleon III on the grounds of the defeat of Napoleon III. As soon as Adolphe Thiers made this declaration, not only the south of France, but also the whole of Europe was shocked. Even William I and Bismarck in Berlin were stunned. The French Emperor Napoleon III in his hands was actually not recognized by a province of France. Fortunately, it was just one. Just as they were thinking this, the same news from France reached Berlin one after another, which made William I and Bismarck sit still. On December 2, 1869, the entire southern French Empire seemed to respond to Adolphe Thiers' call, raised the banner of rebellion, and declared that they would no longer recognize Napoleon II's imperial rule. At the same time, on December 3, 1869, a coup d'état took place in Paris, and the Second French Empire was almost overthrown. Fortunately, with the full help of Prime Minister Charles, the leader of the royalist forces, Queen Eugenie and the King of Algeria, who was also Crown Prince Louis, who was sent back to Paris and advanced by Napoleon III, saved Paris and the entire Western French Empire. Napoleon III fell into the hands of Prussia and seemed to become a hot potato. He became a hot pot on the west, but in the south of France, he became the object of ridicule in the north. London, Madrid, Rome, Vienna and other places have called on Prussia to exercise restraint and not let the situation in the French Empire deteriorate further. At the same time, they also called on the French Empire not to exercise restraint. However, their call was not accepted in France. The North then introduced a model in which Queen Eugenie was the regent, Prince Louis of Algeria, Crown Prince Louis, was the listener, and Prime Minister Charles was the assistant. The area north and west of Saint-Quentin, Paris, Bourges, Orleans, Châteauroux, Poitiers, Niort, La Rochelle became the basic territory of the Second French Empire, supported by the royalist forces. With Napoleon III almost overthrown, some French people in the south and the majority of the members of the National Assembly demanded the implementation of a constitutional monarchy, so there are currently two heirs to the throne in the south. The Legitimists tended to support Henry, a descendant of Charles X, while the Orleansists supported Louis Philippe, a descendant of the former King Louis Philippe, as the successor. With the two factions evenly matched, the bourgeois Republicans represented by Adolphe Thiers showed their prowess at this time, demanding that the bourgeoisie share the power to rule France. Finally, after the three parties gave in, And in front of the stunned European forces, on December 6, 1869, Adolphe Thiers announced in Lyon the overthrow of the Second French Empire and the establishment of the Third French Republic, with a territory ruled by the original southern territory of the French Empire south of Chalons, Châteauroux, Poitiers, Niort, La Rochelle. At the same time, the rulers were the bourgeois republicans and royalists who jointly formed a national defense government. At the same time, Adolphe Thiers was elected as the first president of the government. Adolphe Thiers announced the conscription of 300,000 regular troops to guard the territorial security of the Third French Republic in the south in the new presidential palace in Lyon. President Adolphe Thiers also called on William I and Bismarck to negotiate an armistice. He said that the Third French Republic was willing to negotiate the demarcation of the two countries in the Chalons area on the northeastern border, next to western Switzerland, and was willing to cooperate with Prussia to jointly deal with the Second French Empire regime in the north. The Second French Empire was actually split into two countries like this. What no one expected was that it would develop into this. What was even more unexpected was that Adolphe Thiers, the president of the French Third Republic, was so cunning that he had used the recognition of the territory occupied by Prussia, north of Chalons, as bait before other countries reacted, intending to make Prussia recognize their legitimacy. At the same time, Adolphe Thiers also sent requests to the British Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Kingdom of Italy, the Kingdom of Spain, the Kingdom of Portugal, the Kingdom of Sweden, the Kingdom of Denmark, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, the Russian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Kingdom of Greece and even the United States of America before December 10, 1869, requesting that all countries recognize the legitimacy of the establishment of the country's regime. So on the desks of kings and prime ministers of various countries, there was a telegram with a logo of the French Third Republic from President Adolphe. British Empire, London, Buckingham Palace. Queen Victoria was very upset at this time. The mess of the French Empire made her very passive. Half a month ago, who could have predicted that either Napoleon III would be overthrown and replaced by someone else, or that the Republicans would come to power and we would have to face a new United States, and Prussia would grow to become the overlord of Central and Western Europe. But now look, it has become the French Empire that rules the North and the South. What should we do now? And what on earth is the intelligence organization of the British Empire doing? Such a big thing in southern France, but we were kept in the dark for so long and didn't find anything unusual. This is a huge dereliction of duty. Faced with Israel's menopausal Queen Victoria, Prime Minister Disraeli naturally had to bite the bullet and answer. In fact, not only us, but even Bismarck of Prussia was confused. Seeing Queen Victoria's dissatisfied eyes, Disraeli understood that she was dissatisfied with his evasion, so he changed his tone and said, "Your Majesty, the current division of the French Empire into two is actually not a bad thing for us. I know what you mean, but with the fierce rise of Prussia, the French Empire has been severely weakened at the hands of Napoleon III. If it is divided into two at this time, Prime Minister, do you think you can stop Prussia's millions of troops?" Disraeli said, "I think Queen Eugenie will definitely support a closer relationship with the British Empire at this time. As for the South, in order to balance Prussia, we can divert the trouble to the Kingdom of Italy." Queen Victoria looked at Disraeli with satisfaction, as if waiting for him to say more details. Disraeli said, "Britain can take this opportunity to win over the nobles of the French Empire and make them our allies within the French Empire. If Queen Eugenie agrees, then it will be just a matter of time before our British Empire completely controls the English Channel." Queen Victoria couldn't help but be moved when she heard this. Disraeli followed up, "Similarly, it is not suitable for us to offend the South. In this case, we can guide them to have more contact with Italy. Italy is weak in the Mediterranean at this time, and it is just right to form an alliance with the southern forces of France. In that way, it can intimidate the Austro-Hungarian Empire and Prussia. It is also enough to form a check and balance for Spain, which has a bad relationship with us." "But what about Prussia?" Queen Victoria asked doubtfully. Prime Minister Disraeli said, "Your Majesty, have you forgotten that Prussia is surrounded by not only the Netherlands and the French Empire, but also the Tsarist Russian Empire and the Austro-Hungarian Empire are extremely vigilant about this. We just chose to wait and see before. Now that Adolphe Thiers, the leader of southern France, has made a move, we just need to follow suit and add fuel to the flames immediately." Queen Victoria nodded and said, "Let's do it." Spain, Madrid. Isabella II was worried at this time. She didn't expect that the French Empire in the north, a huge thing, would fall apart into two countries. Her good sister, Queen Eugenie, would become the regent of the north, while the French Third Republic was established in the south. This was very dangerous for the Spanish royal family. Fortunately, it seems that because of the establishment of a new government in the south, Prussia gave up its attack on Paris, which made the northern France region of Queen Eugenie not pose the greatest pressure. Otherwise, with the support of Prussia, it might not be impossible for the French Third Republic in the south to go north immediately. Isabella II suddenly thought of a question, that is, William IV, who had been in contact with her, seemed a little mysterious recently. He had given up trying to win over Queen Eugenie. Was this a coincidence? Or? She couldn't help but have doubts. With this doubt, she began to ask people to keep a close eye on the Netherlands' every move. Perhaps, William IV's Netherlands may have some plans. As the saying goes, the mantis is in front and the oriole is behind. There are always such things in this world. On December 11, 1869, William IV, who had returned to Amsterdam, the capital of the Netherlands, for 10 days, made his first appearance in Rotterdam, the southern territory of the Netherlands. There he met with Queen Isabella II of Spain, and the two announced their support for the Second French Empire under the regency of Queen Eugenie, while demanding that the Adolphe Thiers government exercise restraint. On the previous day, Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom sent Crown Prince Edward to visit the Palace of Versailles in Paris to express condolences to Queen Eugenie and Prince Louis of Algeria, and announced that it would continue to support cooperation with the Second French Empire in maintaining the security of the English Channel and the Atlantic Ocean. On the same day, London demanded that the Kingdom of Prussia abandon its attack on Paris. London also announced that it had sent the English Channel Fleet to pay a friendly visit to Boulogne, a port on the western coast of the Second French Empire. Chapter 604, The Dutch Deification Movement in France. 1869. Spanish Prime Minister Ramon Narvaez visited Paris, met with Prime Minister Charles of the Second French Empire, and was received by Queen Eugenie. Prime Minister Charles and Spanish Prime Minister Ramon Narvaez announced that the Kingdom of Spain and the Second French Empire would cooperate at sea in the Atlantic Ocean and mutually confirm each other's interests. The Kingdom of Spain opposed any invasion of the French Empire by Prussia. However, it is interesting that the Spanish Prime Minister Ramon Narvaez did not agree with Paris' position on the south of France and did not oppose the denial of the southern regime. Obviously, this left room for the future. However, unlike Spain, in Rome, Emmanuel II actually sent his Crown Prince Umberto to Lyon to meet with President Adolphe Thiers and announced in Lyon that the Kingdom of Italy recognized the status of the French Third Republic. Italy's statement made the situation in France suddenly turbulent. Your Majesty, the French Empire is currently divided into North and South. We, the Netherlands, are still in a state of severed diplomatic relations with the North, but the two countries have tacitly agreed to low-key exchanges. However, the Third Republic in the South has sent telegrams for 3 consecutive days, asking us to establish diplomatic relations with it. Italy has taken the lead and become the first country to stand with the South. Spain has an ambiguous attitude and does not deny the Southern regime. Although the United Kingdom seems to be on the side of the North, it is said that their governor of Gibraltar recently visited Marseilles on behalf of London. It is the base camp of the president of the regime, Adolphe Thiers. Among the surrounding countries, the attitudes of our Netherlands, Austria-Hungary, and Prussia are unclear. The weekly Privy Council meeting of the Kingdom of the Netherlands was held. William IV sat in the center, and on the left and right were the military of Chief of Staff Mark Rutte and the Privy Council members of Prime Minister Thorbecke's cabinet government. This was the second time William IV had held a Privy Council meeting in the Netherlands since his return. The main topic of the last meeting was the Franco-Prussian War, and this time the topic became the situation caused by the division of France between the North and the South. The person who just spoke was Dutch Foreign Minister Huspert van. The current situation in Europe is already very strange. The Netherlands is in a very critical position. Belgium has been suppressed by us to an extremely low position. The position of the Netherlands is even more prominent at this time. Therefore, Britain, France and Prussia are all dangerous countries close to the Netherlands. Prime Minister Thorbecke said worriedly, Prussia has huge ambitions and must be guarded against. Napoleon III is now in the hands of Bismarck and others. The Second French Empire in the north has to choose to keep a low profile. The sudden rise of the French Third Republic in the south has brought both danger and opportunity to Prussia. But in my opinion, there are more troubles. Everyone present was smart, and after Talbot finished speaking, everyone knew what he wanted to express. Yes, the French Empire has fallen, so other countries are afraid that France will become the target of Prussia's annexation. If it really succeeds, then how terrifying will Prussia's strength be? It's frightening to think about it. Will the surrounding countries accept Prussia's annexation of the Second French Empire at this time? William IV sneered, so next, we'll just have to watch the show. The Netherlands does not need to participate directly. We just need to see how Bismarck solves the dangers and opportunities in front of us. Seeing that their expressions had eased a little, but still looked worried, William IV smiled at Chancellor, director of the Netherlands International Intelligence Agency, and Bill Charley, director of the Netherlands Royal Intelligence Agency, and said, "How is your plan to hunt French talents going? The disadvantage of the Netherlands is its small population, so plundering other countries' top talents has become a policy that William IV has been implementing for many years. The Netherlands has been fanning the flames in various countries in recent years in order to cause civil unrest in these countries, and then use this to plunder talents from other countries that have already been sent by the Dutch intelligence department to gain an in-depth understanding, and then have more opportunities to incite the other party to immigrate to the Netherlands." Before the Franco-Prussian War began, William IV had already deployed and asked the two intelligence agencies to dig deep into France's talent plan. Now that the war has been over for several months, William IV asked this question. Chancellor and Bill Charley hurriedly said, "Your Majesty has already listed the talents, and they have all arrived or are on their way to the Far East." William IV stared at Prime Minister Thorbecke and asked, "What is the current situation of the French Empire?" Overexpansion of production and corruption in stock trading, the Franco-Prussian War triggered an economic panic in the entire country of France, and the domestic situation continued to deteriorate. The unemployment caused by the Northern War has caused frequent labor riots throughout the South, and social unrest. Hearing Thorbecke's words, everyone present changed their faces. No wonder the Republican forces in southern France rose so quickly. Sure enough, there is no rebellion without a reason. Thorbecke continued, "The war has reduced the willingness of the people to consume, and the overproduction is the main reason for the economic crisis in the French Empire. At present, the products produced by the industries and farmers in the south and north of France are too many, and the market is oversupplied. The prices of products have fallen sharply. This has been slowly accumulated since the British and French invaded the Kingdom of Siam and imposed sanctions in 1867. In the 3 years since 1867, the steel in France has increased by 50%, but its price has plummeted to one-third of the original. Cotton, as a traditional export commodity of France, has increased its output by one-third, but its price has also dropped by 50%. Internationally, due to the large-scale production of cotton by the Netherlands and Australia and the United States of America, and due to the sanctions imposed by various countries on France, our two countries have occupied the original market of France, so they cannot absorb the cotton of the French Empire. Many French farmers and farmers have become the most serious victims of the economic crisis that has come silently in the French Empire. In the past 2 years, nearly one-third of French farms have declared bankruptcy. He also said, not only that, the entire French society is now in a miserable situation of economic depression, but this does not prevent smart people from working at full capacity to make money and rise up. Many of them have taken advantage of these crises to form monopolies in various industries and regions. William IV suddenly asked, "Did Adolphe Thiers take advantage of this to rise?" Thorbecke nodded and said, "Adolphe Thiers, the president of the Third French Republic, has an important ally named Balzac, born in 1799. He was born in Marseilles, but grew up in Paris. His father was a senior official in the Paris government, and he himself was a lawyer. Therefore, he is familiar with the current French society, especially the society and human nature. Because he has been a lawyer, his logical thinking is relatively strong. At the same time, he can peek into all aspects of French society through various cases. He sees the various intrigues and struggles between the French aristocratic forces and the capital forces, as well as their ugly inside stories. In 1863, he decided to write quickly to show the various internal issues. Soon he became a legendary top current affairs writer and social critic known to every household, with great reputation in France. Adolphe Thiers was Balzac's childhood playmate, and the two met again in Paris. Adolf then used Balzac's reputation to serve himself. After waiting for Thorbecke to finish speaking, William IV suddenly said to Bill Charley, director of the Royal Netherlands Intelligence Agency, "You tell me about Balzac." Let Bill Charley tell them about Balzac. Thorbecke was puzzled at first, but suddenly, he thought of something and showed a gleam of light. But William IV pretended not to see it. The whole of France didn't know what happened. In fact, Balzac was a French moral benchmark supported by the Royal Netherlands Intelligence Agency many years ago. William IV wanted to use him to erase or shake the legitimacy of some of the rulers in France. With the support of the Royal Netherlands Intelligence Agency, Balzac became famous in Europe in just 5 or 6 years and became a leading figure in the European clean-stream critical school. In Balzac's criticism, the entire French Empire is currently a society dominated by money. Everyone is busy pursuing wealth and money, and using this to prove their value and status. The pursuit of fame and fortune, materialism, money worship, and hedonism are the characteristics of the times in France, especially Paris. The entire French society is filled with an extremely selfish and cold money ideology. Therefore, a large number of sophisticated egoists appeared in his manuscripts, including downtrodden nobles, greedy capitalists, stingy income earners, petty citizens, inhumane bullies, ruthless politicians, etc. Each of his articles pierced the hearts of all losers, making them feel the same, especially those who hate the rich at the bottom of society who regard this as a Bible. In the world of Balzac's articles, the whole of France is written in his articles. France is a society with clear social classes and a widening gap between the rich and the poor. The capitalists, politicians, nobles, and ambitious people in the French upper class are extravagant and greedy. The French middle class, including economic people, Americans, notaries, judges, etc., work hard to make money, thinking about how to increase their wealth every day, cling to the powerful, and squeeze into the upper class. The workers, citizens, and petty bourgeoisie at the bottom of society are overworked, nervous, and think about how to stabilize their current lives every day, protect their competitive advantages, and not be deprived of their vested interests. At the same time, they improve their lives and make themselves less tired. Don't talk about others. William IV thought about his previous life. Wasn't this the kind of life he lived? The current Netherlands and the whole of Europe are actually similar to France. They are all social groups that compete for the upper position after being divided into levels. Bill Charley said proudly at this time, "Balzac has become the savior of France. He has been deified. There is no bad thing like money circulating everywhere in the world. This thing can destroy the city-state, drive people out of their hometowns, teach good people bad things, and make them go astray, do shameful things, and even make people do evil and commit all kinds of crimes." Therefore, Balzac's words have become the most popular at the bottom of European society. The relationship between people is strong, human nature is distorted, individuality is annihilated, whoever has money has power, etc., are all reflected in Balzac's writing. Bill Charley smiled to William IV at this time. He lived up to expectations and completed the first unification. Chapter 605, The Danish Royal Palace in Copenhagen. The Kingdom of Denmark, Copenhagen, Yellow Palace. Sitting at the top are Christian IX and Queen Louisa, and next to him is Hans Christian Andersen, a fairy tale lecturer hired by the royal family. Andersen is also a friend of Christian IX for more than 20 years. Below them are the Danish Crown Prince Frederik, 1843, Princess Louisa, 1851, the only daughter of King Carl XV, who had just married to the Crown Princess from the Kingdom of Sweden and moved to Copenhagen, the Netherlands, only 4 months ago, Prince George, 1845, Princess Helena, 1846, Prince George's wife, Queen Victoria's third daughter, Princess Thera, 1853, and Prince Valdemar, 1858. Everyone is discussing the fact that the French critic Balzac actually stood up to support Adolphe Thiers to become the Third French Republic. Gobseck is a miser who loves money like his life. He lends money at high interest rates and runs a plantation. He also speculates in government bonds, seizes and uses various opportunities to make a fortune, and once became the richest man in the area. However, he's extremely stingy. In order to fight for money, he even scared his wife to death and blocked his daughter's inheritance rights, causing her love tragedy. This is from Gobseck, a critic of the French Empire, Balzac. This story made me see through time in an instant. There is only one tangible thing that has considerable value and is worth our worrying about. This thing is gold. This is why I value Balzac's Eugenie Grandit more," Princess Helena said with some admiration. However, as soon as she finished speaking, someone refuted her. "No, I prefer Balzac's Old Goriot. Old Goriot is a nouveau riche. After losing his beloved wife, he refused to remarry and transferred all his love for his wife to his 2 daughters. He regarded them as the apple of his eye and gave them everything he had to enjoy. He hired the best teachers to cultivate their various talents, let them learn to ride horses, have their own cars, and live a luxurious life like the mistress of a rich old lord. When his 2 daughters grew up, Old Goriot took out a high dowry and let his 2 daughters marry into wealthy families, becoming a countess and a banker's wife, and entering the upper class. Of course, at this time, Old Goriot was respected by his 2 daughters, but the good times did not last long. After getting married, the 2 daughters spent money like water. When they had no money or spent all their money, they asked the couple for money. No matter how rich they were, they could not fill these 2 bottomless pits. After Old Goriot was squeezed dry of the last time by his 2 daughters, he could no longer repay his daughters' love with money, and was eventually abandoned by his 2 daughters. Princess Tyra has always been very unhappy with her basta sister-in-law Princess Helena from London. The woman in front of her has always been dissatisfied with her elder sister Alexandra, Queen of the Netherlands. It is said that she is very jealous of Alexandra, so Princess Tyra is hostile to her. As soon as she finished speaking, Princess Tyra stood up to attack. Seeing this, Princess Helena was naturally dissatisfied, but because her husband Prince George did not support her very much, and Princess Tyra was deeply loved by Christian IX, she had no choice but to pretend not to care. But she unconsciously appeared to be more generous. However, Princess Tyra was given a cold look and warning by the short Crown Prince Frederick. At this time, Christian IX and Queen Louisa were a little embarrassed, and they were not good at scolding. After all, their good friend Anderson was still beside them. Seeing this, Anderson said sympathetically, "Both princesses are right." At the last moment of his life, old man Gao was alone in the cold room, while his 2 daughters were at home dressing up carefully to attend Madame Bossaine's grand ball. The distortion of human nature by money was particularly obvious at this moment. Anderson sighed. There are also Miss Emily, Viscountess Bossain, Marquis Escrignon, etc. They are all representatives of the downtrodden aristocracy. No matter whether they are noble ladies or ladies of the society, they are all very self-respecting, proud, and self-righteous. They despise the vulgarity and money-grubbing of the upstarts and bourgeois nouveau riche, but deep down they fantasize about restoring the privileges of the aristocracy and dream of being wealthy. Hypocrisy. Nobility is the performance. At this point, Anderson, who was born in 1805, flashed a deep look as if he had seen through the vicissitudes of the world. After everyone present was deeply touched, Anderson said, "France is the world leader in criticism, and Balzac is one of the best. Therefore, his appearance in the French political world this time has made him stand out. Perhaps in the near future, critics may become a new force in the political arena of various countries. At that time, critics will become a contradictory but ironic title." Hearing this, Christian IX said with empathy, "There is nothing in the world that is not driven by interests. Balzac is like this, and so are others. Except for Frederick and Anderson, you all go down, let me have a good talk with Anderson." Hearing this, everyone knew that this was a discussion of confidential things, perhaps something involving politics, otherwise why would the 2 crown princes Frederick stay? Prince George left as if nothing had happened, but Princess Helena frowned, but left helplessly, but from an angle where no one could see. Her right hand was clenched, and she even glared at her husband Prince George who was walking in front of her. But what he didn't know was that this scene was seen by Anderson, who was not far from her. He glanced at Prince George who was walking in front, then looked at Crown Prince Frederick who stayed behind, and finally sighed. After seeing everyone leave, Christian IX said solemnly, "France is now divided into the north and the south. The pressure on Prussia has become even smaller. Berlin is currently stepping up its deployment of troops. I am afraid that a battle in Paris will have to be fought." Crown Prince Frederick nodded and said, "The French Empire was originally dizzy and turned around by Prussia in terms of strength at the beginning. Not only that, it was originally thought that Paris would mobilize all of France to fight back against Prussia's invasion, but it turned out that the Southern Republicans took the opportunity to rise." "Father, teacher." Crown Prince Frederick doubted and said, Maybe Bismarck and William I had planned this long ago. No one even knows whether Adolf Hitler had already been contacted by Bismarck. The situation in Paris is very dangerous at this time. Anderson waited for him to finish before saying, "The current situation is beyond everyone's expectations. Even the British Empire is currently sitting on its hands." Originally, everyone knew that Britain liked to balance power and use Prussia to suppress and weaken the French Empire, but they did not expect France to break into two pieces at the slightest touch. This was something Britain did not expect, and it broke Britain's original idea of sitting on its hands. I think that Britain's recent frequent interactions with Paris in supporting maritime security in the English Channel are actually London reminding Berlin that Britain's bottom line is there. Chapter 606, The Anger of Charles, Prime Minister of the French Empire. Denmark, Copenhagen, Yellow Palace. Danish King Christian IX was talking with his good friend Hans Christian Andersen and Crown Prince Frederick. When Andersen said that Britain was using the maritime interaction with the Paris government in the English Channel to hint Prussia not to invade the Second French Empire in the north of France, Christian IX could not help but frown. Christian IX reminded, "The ambitions of William I and Bismarck are known to all Europe." Is the British reminder effective? Don't forget that the Kingdom of Hanover was one of the two major allies of Britain on the European continent, the other was Belgium, but it has been devoured by Bismarck and his people. What's more, Britain is now preoccupied with the Far East and Burma. Do you think Prussia will give up such a good opportunity and let Paris have a new lease of life? Andersen shook his head. "I think your Majesty may have misunderstood that London also has different ideas." Upon hearing this, Crown Prince Frederick asked his father Christian IX, "What are you saying, teacher?" Without waiting for Andersen to answer, Christian IX asked in surprise, "The division of the French Empire is a great joy for Prussia and Britain." Andersen nodded heavily. "I think it's not just Britain and Prussia, countries like Italy and Spain don't like it either." Crown Prince Frederick suddenly asked, "What about the Kingdom of the Netherlands?" Christian IX and William I were embarrassed when they heard this. In the trilateral relationship between Sweden, Denmark and the Netherlands, because he had been close to Sweden and deliberately alienated the Netherlands, especially with Sweden trying to win over Spain to join the Nordic alliance, the relationship between the Netherlands and Denmark is no longer as good as it was when they first got married. So when faced with the problem of his eldest son Frederick, Christian IX hesitated. Although Andersen was dissatisfied with Christian IX's move to belong to the Netherlands, he had to help him at this time. William IV's intentions are currently unclear. It seems that the Netherlands will not help France on the issue of France, but to be honest, his mind is unclear and it is difficult to figure out what he is thinking. Crown Prince Frederick asked in surprise, "His Majesty William IV is also a student of the teacher, but even the teacher cannot see his true face. It seems that my brother-in-law is really as mysterious as the rumors in Europe now." Christian IX looked at Andersen apologetically, then sighed to Crown Prince Frederick. "The Nordic alliance was originally as solid as a rock. Karl XV and I had no objection to William IV's dominance. However, as the Netherlands focused its main energy on the Far East, the Nordic alliance has weakened as the Netherlands' strength in Europe has weakened." Christian IX seemed to be explaining to Crown Prince Frederick, but in fact he was explaining to Andersen, "In the face of the increasingly powerful Prussia and the Russian Empire, we can only draw Spain in to make up for the gap left after the Netherlands transferred its strength." Hearing this, Andersen sighed inwardly. From the very beginning, after he knew that William IV had acquired New Guinea Island in the Australian continent, he already knew that William IV was aiming for the Far East. There were too many powerful countries in Europe, and the geographical location of the Netherlands was destined to limit its own development. Anyone who knew a little about geography, history and politics knew that relying on the European mainland, the Netherlands could only be exploited, because he also understood William IV's approach very well. The Netherlands must migrate to the Far East, focus on the Far East, stay away from the central vortex of the European power hegemony struggle, and develop secretly in the Far East. Therefore, Andersen, the fairy tale master, had to say inwardly, if Christian IX of Denmark and Karl XV of Sweden thought from the beginning that the Netherlands would silently bear the rise and prosperity of the surrounding powers in Europe with them while their own regime swayed, then they would be too naive. Therefore, after hearing Christian IX's explanation, Andersen chose to remain silent. Hopefully, William IV will remember the kindness of Denmark, his allied country, and help him sometime in the future. On December 18, 1869, the National Defense Government of the French Third Republic sent a senior official to Berlin to meet Bismarck, who was warmly received by the Prussian Prime Minister. It is also said that William I personally wrote a letter and asked him to pass it on to Adolphe Thiers, the president of the French Third Republic. For this, the French Second Empire in Paris expressed great indignation. We don't think Berlin's approach is a smart one, because the Southern Republicans' actions have already touched upon the interests of European royal families. An emperor who rules an empire has just been captured by Prussia, and Prussia, the captured French emperor, actually received the rebels openly a few days later, and enthusiastically gave these rebels extraordinary encouragement in an equal manner. Prime Minister Charles of the Second French Empire in Paris criticized the actions of William I and Bismarck in the European Times. He even publicly criticized the French emperor is being held hostage by Prussia, and Prussia is openly meeting with the rebels of the French Empire. I now have to ask all the citizens of the French Empire a sincere question. Do you think that your southern official who just shook hands with the enemy who had killed and injured hundreds of thousands of people is a qualified French patriot? Is he still a Frenchman who is fearless in France? I think everyone should think the other way around. This is not the level of rebellion against the Paris authorities. This is a sinner of the French, a sinner who is living in cahoots with the enemy. Prime Minister Charles' powerful and forceful words shocked the whole of France. Many people could not help but think of the South's current initiative to approach the Kingdom of Prussia, which seemed to be almost the same as surrendering to the enemy. The proud Gauls seemed to see the contemptuous eyes of the countries surrounding France gathering around them, and how could they bear such contempt? As a result, northern France united unprecedentedly around Paris. During this time, Queen Eugénie called on the French people to voluntarily join the army to defend their country, and 100,000 new soldiers joined the army in just 3 days. Even in the south, in the French Third Republic, many people began to ask Adolphe Thiers to keep a distance from Prussia, at least not to launch any attacks on the north during the war between the North and Prussia, including diplomacy. However, Adolphe Thiers was not a pushover, and Bismarck would not easily let the Second French Empire turn over. When everyone was watching the Second French Empire, Prime Minister Charles's article like a surrender to gain sympathy points in Paris, Adolphe Thiers and Bismarck had actually completed the negotiations between Prussia and the Third French Republic, the southern part of France. I have something to do today, so there's only one chapter. I will make up for the missing chapter tomorrow and update a total of 3 chapters. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 607, Dutch Population Policy. 1869, Adolphe Thiers, the interim president of the National Defense Government of the Third Republic of France in the divided southern France, and Bismarck of the Kingdom of Prussia signed an armistice agreement between Prussia and southern France in Berlin. After the news came out, the Second French Empire in Paris in the north expressed opposition to any agreement between Berlin and Lyon. Despite this, the Charles government declared the Lyon government an illegal regime. He called on the Prussian government in Berlin not to turn a blind eye to the Second French Empire's firm will to maintain national unity. At the same time, he also called on the Prussian government to release the captured Napoleon III. Unfortunately, Berlin was dismissive. Bismarck and Adolphe Thiers declared in Berlin that they supported the exchanges and peace between the two countries, and jointly called on the Second French Empire government in Paris not to interfere in the friendly exchanges between Prussia and the Third French Republic. Adolphe Thiers, Prussia loves peace and likes to have friendly exchanges with peace-loving countries. The Franco-Prussian War began when the Second Empire led by His Majesty Napoleon III declared war on Prussia, which led to a large-scale war between the French Empire and Prussia. And it hurt the feelings of both sides, and southern France was unwilling to go to war with Prussia, so we rejected the rule of the tyrant Napoleon III and declared war to peacefully end the war with Prussia that should not have existed. What's wrong with this? Bismarck, who was also present, said firmly, Prussia has a close relationship with the French Third Republic. We in Berlin highly appreciate the expectations of the Third Republic government in Lyon for peace. Therefore, His Excellency President Adolphe Thiers and I are standing here today, hoping that the French Second Empire government in Paris can see the situation clearly and make a choice that is beneficial to them. Finally, the two also announced that the Kingdom of Prussia and the French Third Republic reached a military consensus, Prussia and the French Third Republic reached a military assistance agreement, and the two countries would provide a docking agreement for mutual visits of naval ships in the Mediterranean and the North. The successive agreements between Prussia and the French Third Republic made Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom look very ugly. Britain had just reached an agreement on mutual visits to English Channel ports with the Second French Empire in Paris in the north, but Prussia and the French Third Republic reached it first. This was a slap in the face. At the same time, Bismarck's public reception of Adolf Hitler in Berlin was an announcement of Prussia's dissatisfaction with Britain, which was a confrontational move. This naturally made Queen Victoria very dissatisfied, and the consequences of the Queen's dissatisfaction were naturally very serious. On December 23, 1869, William IV received a telegram from the Queen from Buckingham Palace in London. The British Empire is willing to support the Netherlands' claim to the New Zealand Islands, but the Netherlands must support Britain's policies on the Southeast Asian Peninsula, including, first, support Britain's colonization of Upper Burma. Second, the Netherlands also needs to support Britain in its European stance, at least when it comes to British interests. The Netherlands must maintain a minimum neutral stance. Third, the Netherlands needs to support Britain's joining the International Court of Justice in The Hague and agree that Britain will be a partner country of the Nordic Alliance. Finally, the Netherlands needs to support Britain as the global leader in maritime power. William IV looked at the London telegram that had just been typed out by the telegraph machine less than half an hour ago, and a smile appeared on his face. Her Majesty the Queen of England could no longer hold back. The rise of Prussia accelerated with a division of France, at least on the surface. As I explained to Queen Victoria, the Netherlands has already been recognized by Queen Victoria under the dominance of Bismarck. William IV said proudly, then, no matter how the situation of the French Empire develops, it is inevitable that Prussia will eventually become the #1 target of Britain's restriction. If the development situation in the previous life remains unchanged, Europe will enter a 40-year stage of peaceful development in the future. Britain and Prussia, soon to be the German Empire, will enter a stage of alliances and win over in Europe, and the Netherlands will become the object of Britain and Prussia's scramble to win over due to my advanced preparation. During this period, the development of the Far East will also enter the fast lane. Using these 40 years of peace in Europe, the Netherlands will completely complete the transformation of the Far East dominating the Netherlands. By then, the impact of the European self-indulgent World War I on the Netherlands will be minimized. At the same time, the Netherlands will be more suitable to be a paradise for European refugees than the American Commonwealth, which is close to the Atlantic Ocean. Thinking of this, William IV narrowed his eyes slightly. Bismarck must now think that Prussia's instant contact with the French Third Republic has already grasped the initiative in the northern and southern forces of France. In addition, Prussia occupied 1/6 of France's territory in the east of France. It can be said that it has played a major role in the internal forces of France and has become an internal third-party force within the territory of the French Empire. He thought it was enough to dominate the future direction of France, but what Bismarck didn't know was that I had begun to bring Balzac under the Royal Netherlands Intelligence Agency many years ago. With the help of the Royal Netherlands Intelligence Agency over the years, Balzac became famous, gained prestige and fame, and stepped into the French political arena with a shocking step. According to the news that Bill Charlie received from Balzac, Adolf Hitler was going to appoint him as the Minister of the Interior of the Second French Republic. If this is true, then the actions of the Third French Republic in the future will be open to the Royal Netherlands Intelligence Agency. For the Netherlands, it has taken the lead in understanding the development of the internal situation in France. However, the Netherlands has not yet achieved a leapfrog lead over Britain and Prussia in high technology, but it needs to speed up. Also, after the Franco-Prussian War, the development of Australia will be the most important event for the Netherlands in the next 40 years. A complete development plan must be set up to supervise and urge it, otherwise it will be difficult to get the results I expect. William IV thought of this and couldn't help but secretly praise himself for ignoring everyone's opinions and buying the Far East Australian continent from Britain, which was still deserted except for the indigenous people in the past few years. Now there are more than 7 million white people and 3 million indigenous people, with a ratio of 7:3. Moreover, more than 2 million of the 7 million indigenous people in the Dutch East Indies have moved to Africa, and the current ratio of white people to indigenous people there is 200:500. In other words, in the Far East alone, the Kingdom of the Netherlands has 9 million white people there, and only 8 million indigenous people. The white people finally completed the first reversal of the white and indigenous population at the end of 1868. Today, there are 1.1 million Dutch whites in Africa, and 2.87 million in the native lands. The ratio of 1.2 million Dutch whites to 13 million natives, including 2 million natives who migrated from the Far East in the past decade, is nearly 1:10. Chapter 608, Establishing a Dutch Federation member state organization in the future? Seeing that the Dutch population transformation policy in the Far East perfectly completed the transformation of whites and natives, it would be a lie for William IV to say that he was unhappy. Those who are not of my race must have different hearts. The current integration policy is actually more about the integration of Dutch whites into natives, rather than the equal integration of Dutch whites and natives. Look at the 1868 year-end population change report provided by Jongler, the Dutch Interior Minister, some time ago. The birth rate of whites has increased by more than twice that of natives. Among them, the mixed blood ratio of whites and natives with white men in the Far East has reached more than 95%. That is to say, among the mixed blood babies born in the Far East, 95 out of 100 children have Dutch white fathers. What does this show? This shows that Dutch white men are using native women as baby-making machines to increase the population growth of Dutch white blood. Even William IV can guess without limit that these children may be accidental products born on impulse by some Dutch whites. It is said that in the Far East, almost every Dutch white family is looking for a nanny. This industry is growing rapidly in the Far East. Currently, many Dutch native women have become the most employed in this industry. Think about the Filipino nannies who were popular in the world because they knew English in the past life, and think about the Dutch East Indies now because the Dutch rule began in 1596 when the Dutch first occupied Java Island in the Dutch East Indies, and then in 1641, they defeated Portugal, which occupied and controlled Malacca, allowing the Dutch to completely expand to occupy the entire East Indies. If the former is calculated, it has been more than 270 years, and even the latter is 228 years. Let's look at the British occupation of India, which was only a few decades. The United States occupied the Philippines in the previous life, which was less than 50 years. The United States occupied the Philippines from Spain in less than 50 years and made the country an English-speaking country. With the advantage of English, it became the world's largest exporter of nannies. India has also become the world's #1 exporter of labor in the past 200 years with the advantage of English. Now, after 200 years of Dutch rule in the Dutch East Indies, the Dutch language there has long become a superior language that everyone is eager to learn. It is also the official language. In the past 10 years, with the efforts of William IV, Dutch has become the language of most people in the Far East. Will many local indigenous languages there disappear in time soon? The indigenous people there will only recognize Dutch and forget the indigenous language. This is not the internet era of later generations, and no one will care about the extinction of a language in a remote corner. No one will worry about the so-called human rights lawsuits after the language is eliminated and assimilated. Thinking of this, William IV could not help but appreciate that this era was indeed the most suitable era for colonists in Europe. There was no fear of being sent to the civil court for killing people, no fear of being sent to the military court for starting a war, and no fear of being criticized by people at home and abroad for holding a European colonist conference to distribute territories in order to colonize other countries. Even Anderson of this era, the fairy tale king who was admired by countless men, women, old and young in later generations, continued to enjoy the worship of others in later generations. The various writers of this era were actually nationalists. Just look at the great writers in Britain. You should know that the former Prime Minister Clayton and his mortal enemy, the current British Prime Minister Disraeli, had problems. In addition to being politicians, they were most famous for being columnists in newspapers, especially the latter Disraeli, who had published his works in major British newspapers for a long time. Look at him, who was rated as the most aggressive British Prime Minister in later generations, and you will know how hypocritical he was as a writer. Therefore, William IV understood a truth that colonizing other countries can be whitewashed as developing other countries to rescue the poor people in those places and help them out of difficulties. Economic plunder can be said to help them develop their economy and get them out of the uncompetitive primitive economy of men farming and women weaving. The Netherlands advocates that everyone learn Dutch in the Far East. The truth is that the indigenous language is extinct, but it can be whitewashed as helping these indigenous people improve their language skills, helping them find a decent job after learning Dutch, and helping their families get out of poverty. It is under the guidance of such Dutch government policies that the Netherlands is currently implementing the Dutch language policy in the Far East. The integration policy proposed by William IV has been implemented very well. White people, indigenous mixed-race Dutch people, indigenous people, and other white people in Europe who migrated to the Far East are all under the Dutch language enforcement policy. Dutch completely covers 80% of the population in the Dutch Far East, and the remaining only a few elderly Dutch indigenous people. The implementation of the Dutch language policy in the Far East is almost complete. The Hawaiian Islands and the Alaska Peninsula, Suriname in South America, and Aruba, Curaçao, and the Netherlands Antilles in the Caribbean will be the second targets for language assimilation. William IV couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief when he thought of this. After these places have completed the localization of the Dutch language, we will implement the localization of the Dutch language in Africa depending on the situation. However, the situation in Africa is slightly different from other places. Other places are islands or peninsulas, and there are many external influences, so it is easier. However, except for Madagascar, Mauritius and Louvain Island, Africa is connected to the entire African continent, which is very unfavorable for the closed language assimilation policy. Therefore, the Dutch language assimilation policy may be biased. In various regions of Africa in the previous life, the colonies of Britain, France, Portugal, Belgium, Germany, Italy and other countries had various colonial language assimilation policies, but the results were minimal. Almost all of these places later broke away from colonial rule and became independent countries. They all retained the language of the colonizing country as the official language, but the local indigenous languages under their jurisdiction were also unshakable. William IV shook his head. Forget it, let's talk about the future later. Perhaps many years later, the Africa controlled by the Netherlands will be like the colonies controlled by Britain, France and other countries in the past, and they will establish their own native countries one after another? The deployment made now at that time may at most get a Dutch federation with the same membership of the Commonwealth of Nations. Perhaps thinking of something, William IV couldn't help but sneer and thought, what we need to do now is not to treat them well, but to plunder their resources for the use of the Netherlands. In this way, when the Netherlands rises and strengthens, when the people in these places are proud to be Dutch, they will naturally not rebel against Dutch rule. Otherwise, look at the Britain that was deserted or taken advantage of by others in later generations. Think of the news that India asked for the jeweled crown shortly after the Queen's death in the 21st century, and then think of the British Empire that everyone fears now. The comparison between the before and after makes people understand that strength is the hard truth. Otherwise, why didn't India dare to ask Britain for the crown in 1945 when it just became an independent country? Thinking of this question, William IV looked at the telegram sent to him by Queen Victoria of England, and couldn't help but think, same queen, but different styles indeed. Chapter 609, Christmas Eve Protestant West Church. Christmas Eve is also known as Christmas Eve, which is the eve of Christmas. It is on December 24th every year. In most Christian churches, it can only be a part of the Christmas festival. Traditionally, many Christians will participate in midnight mass or gatherings on Christmas Eve, usually held in the church. Some churches will hold candlelight worship earlier in the evening. There will usually be a drama performance of the story of Jesus' birth, and a big meal will also be enjoyed. William IV is now holding a mass in the West Church tonight. The entire West Church is very quiet, and everyone's eyes are on William IV, because this is the third time William IV has entered the West Church to attend the Christmas Eve Mass in the past 10 years. What they don't know is that in order to establish this status as the king of believers in the Dutch religious beliefs, William IV has participated in the annual Christmas Eve Church Mass for 12 consecutive years since he traveled through time in 1857. The purpose, of course, is to gain the loyalty of religious believers. There are churches of various Christian denominations in the Netherlands, including the Old Church of the Catholic Church, the South Church, the North Church, the East Church and the West Church of the Protestant Church, and the Jewish Synagogue. It can be said that the Netherlands is the most tolerant country in Europe in terms of faith. However, if you look at the 4 Protestant churches, you will know that Protestantism is still the #1 denomination in the Netherlands. The West Church, with a tower as high as 85 meters, is undoubtedly the most eye-catching building on the riverside of Amsterdam, the Netherlands. The famous architects of the 17th century worked together to create it. In Europe, Almost half of the churches face the desolate moment of sunset after hundreds of years, but the West Church remains unchanged and accepts people's admiration with its original attitude of looking down on the crowd. Almost every time a new leader of the Netherlands dies, he will be buried in this church. Therefore, it has become the most worshipped place for Dutch Protestants. This church is simply decorated and has a very narrow entrance. After entering the church, there is a nave with a similar double Greek cross shape. Its roof is all made of wooden arched structure. It is the largest Protestant church in the Netherlands. After his great-grandfather William I died, he and his grandfather William II were also buried here. Therefore, William IV came here every year and lived a loyal and filial life to respect his Protestant identity and gained great popularity among the Dutch. After all, 80% of the Dutch believe in Protestant Christianity. The bell tower of the West Church is the tallest spire in Amsterdam, 265 feet high. There is a crown on the top of the tower, which is to commemorate the Austrian Emperor Max VI in 1489. The West Church, which began to be built in 1620, has an organ made by the famous violin maker Duchet in 1682 and painted by the mural master Lyris. In addition, Rembrandt, the most famous painter in Dutch history, also slept here with his young son, and there is a tombstone for commemoration. It can be said that this has become a place where European painting fans want to check in. In Europe, if you, as a monarch, do not have your own religious beliefs, then you will definitely not be able to stay in this position for a month. No, it should be said that it will be reduced by 30 times, that is, one day, and even becoming a monarch is an incredible thing. Christianity is the greatest common denominator in Europe. You can be Orthodox, Catholic, or even Protestant, but after surpassing these three major sects, you cannot become a monarch or king of European countries, and even a cabinet member of each government. The United States of America in this era will also use these three major sects to constrain the door of the cabinet government members of the United States. So it is definitely not a coincidence that William IV came here on Christmas Eve tonight. Look at the scene of more than 300,000 people inside and outside the West Church surrounding the next Mass. You can imagine that a Buddhist temple in the future has so many believers and quietly listens to the bishop explaining the history of Jesus' birth clearly in your ears. It is more magical and terrible. European missionaries can be said to be the pioneers of the West's attack on the world. They can lurk in the natives of the world as intelligence personnel to transmit intelligence to the local area and make their own contributions to the future colonization. Look at the history of the 19th and 20th centuries. Before colonization, it was almost missionaries who were preaching. After getting familiar with the countries to be colonized, the colonizing countries weighed the gains and losses before launching wars. Of course, there are good missionaries, but that is the future. At least after Marco Polo sent back his intelligence to the West had the most ardent idea of colonizing the East, in order to deprive the East of its wealth, right? So, you can disdain missionaries in your heart, but you can't suppress them at all, because using them well can add points to your domestic rule and provide a boost for your external expansion, but if you suppress them, you may become their betrayal soon. Look at the current battle between Emmanuel II of the Kingdom of Italy and the Pope of Rome in world diplomacy for the city of Rome. You can imagine how ridiculous and respectable this is. This is also the reason why Prussia was actually crowned by the Pope in Paris after invading the French Empire and promoted Prussia to become the German Empire. Bismarck is currently increasing his lobbying of the Pope and helping the Pope suppress Emmanuel II to gain the Pope's support. Bismarck has a good idea. William IV looked at the bishop of the West Church praying solemnly, and everyone followed with a repentant face. William IV was naturally the same, but he knew in his heart that everyone had a different mentality and was only making superficial compromises to religion after calculating the gains and losses. He is like this now, and so are William I and Bismarck. The same is true for the Anglican Church, which was founded by Queen Victoria to serve the British King. Therefore, in Europe, the politics of compromise will gain the greatest benefits. William IV's biggest work over the years has been to make a lot of compromises, but most of them are compromises made by other countries to him, not his Netherlands to compromise with people. However, it must be said that he compromised the most with religion, just like tonight he gave up talking to his eldest son Albert about the new works of the fairy tale master Andersen, and chose to come here to Mass in the cold winter. This is compromise. The time traveler also needs to adapt to the environment here. If he, an atheist in his previous life, chooses to rebel and disobey his Protestant identity, then it is unimaginable for him to step down or become the king of the Netherlands. Next, maybe it is time to reform religion for my own benefit, but the action cannot be too big. Even if it is a big fight, it can be chosen in the Far East first, rather than in Europe. Chapter 610, Britain's Diplomatic Suppression of Prussia. Just as everyone in the West, like William IV, had just celebrated Christmas Eve Mass the night before and happily enjoyed the joy of Christmas the next day, on December 27, 1869, the war and political disputes in Europe finally became the most eye-catching things in newspapers of various countries. In particular, on the front page of the European Times, the largest newspaper in Europe, which was put on sale on December 27, 1869, a group of bold fonts read, "In order to deal with Prussia, Britain is wooing partners to negotiate support for Paris." It turned out that on December 26, 1869, in order to deal with the influence of the Kingdom of Prussia, Britain was about to hold a partner consultation in London to assist Paris's Second French Empire. At the beginning of the article, the British Foreign Office attacked the security agreement signed by Prime Minister Bismarck of the Kingdom of Prussia and President Adolphe Thiers, a French rebel, a few days ago in Berlin. The newspaper quoted Herman van Perron, a top European commentator, as saying that the competition between Britain and Prussia for influence in Western Europe has intensified. Britain is worried that Prussia's model of annexing others to strengthen itself as it rapidly develops from Central Europe to Western Europe will make the British Empire's approach of maintaining a balance in Europe and maintaining its maritime hegemony to restrain European countries suddenly lose its effect. The differences between the two countries have intensified the competition and triggered concerns that Western Europe may be annexed by Prussia and that Britain will support militarized actions in various countries to resist annexation. Herman van Perron, Dean of the School of Diplomacy at Leiden University, the oldest university in the Netherlands, founded in 1862, and a special commentator for the most influential European newspaper, the European Times, said, "Most European countries have insufficient coordination in dealing with the rapid rise of Prussia. Britain must now explore the best approach." Britain has now applied to join the International Court of Justice in The Hague. It is said that it is also applying to become a partner country of the Nordic Alliance and is even said to be preparing to apply to become a member of the Nordic Alliance in the near future. So I think that Britain may use the existing mechanism established by the Netherlands to have closer contact with the whole of Europe and even the Atlantic countries in the future, and strive to maximize Britain's influence. The reason for Britain's joining may be the opportunity brought to Britain by the danger of Prussia's rise. Britain strives to use the pressure brought to various countries by Prussia to make its intervention more acceptable, because it can do better than it is now. The European Times reported that Britain will invite the foreign ministers of all member countries of the International Court of Justice in The Hague to meet in London this week to discuss how to better coordinate the European and American countries on both sides of the Atlantic to face the current difficulties of France in the face of competition from Prussia. At the same time, Britain took the lead in announcing in advance that this meeting is an aid summit to support the Second French Empire in Paris. A spokesman for the British Foreign Office revealed at an event of the Foreign Office in London on Monday that the British Foreign Secretary will hold a diplomatic summit in London with foreign ministers of various countries organized by the International Court of Justice in The Hague this Friday. Prior to this, Foreign Secretary Russell will hold a 10-nation meeting with Spain, the Netherlands, Austria-Hungary, Switzerland, Denmark, Sweden, Tsarist Russia, Belgium, the Second French Empire, Paris, and the host Britain on Thursday. Because this includes all the countries surrounding the Kingdom of Prussia, it is also called the Anti-Prussian 10-Nation Alliance by the gossipers. This Anti-Prussian 10-Nation Alliance discusses issues related to the European region. If the Anti-Prussian 10-Nation Alliance summit is held successfully, Britain may increase its influence in the European continent in one fell swoop. After all, the organization includes more than two-thirds of the countries in Europe, and the remaining ones are only Italy, Greece, Portugal, and Prussia. Herman van Perron said that if the Anti-Prussian 10-Nation Alliance becomes a long-term force, then in the future Prussia will be like a half-shackle hanging around its neck, and its every move will be watched by all countries. It will become the target of attention. If the intelligence of various countries is interconnected with Prussia as a point of convergence, then Prussia may be difficult to move in the future. He said that the reason why all European countries were willing to cooperate with Britain's call and sent diplomats at the foreign minister level to London this time showed that after Prussia launched the Prussian-Danish War and the Prussian-Austrian War one after another, The countries around Prussia in Europe were defeated by a powerful country like the French Empire. This caused unprecedented fear in all countries. The survival of countries around Prussia was threatened, and the situation was more severe than in the past. They faced serious impacts from the survival threat posed by the changing threats from Prussia and the economic disaster caused. As the leading country in the International Court of Justice in The Hague, it seems that there are still unreliable speculations about the Netherlands. It is not because the Netherlands did something wrong, but because the Netherlands is not strong enough and cannot balance Prussia. Therefore, the attention of various countries has turned to Britain at sea. After all, Britain once led the opposition to Napoleon I and succeeded. Britain's offshore balancer policy in the past few decades has also promoted peace in Europe, so Britain may really join the International Court of Justice in The Hague for this reason. Herman van Perron said, "The International Court of Justice in The Hague lacks support and coordination for the security of most European countries, so the organization may take a series of measures to explore the best practices after Britain joins. Their Queen will use existing mechanisms and other forces to balance Prussia's ambitions." He told the European Times that some countries will plan assistance for Prussia's business prospects and carry out more diplomatic work in Europe, and expanding contacts may include Prussia's undeniable strategic considerations, which means that Prussia can also play a balancing role on other major powers. In the past 6 or 7 years, we have seen an increasingly ambitious Prussia. It wants to develop military power in continental Europe and Africa. This has caused dissatisfaction among the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Russian Empire, the British Empire and other countries. The French Empire was the first target of attack because it felt that it could not help but take action when the threat was still small. The defeat of Denmark, Austria and France made the countries around Prussia extremely anxious, as did other countries in the region. Herman van Perron said that British Foreign Secretary Russell held a pan-Prussian 10-nation summit on December 29 and December 30 before the end of 1869, which reflected that the British Empire must clearly think about the greater expansion of Prussia's power in Europe. He said that Britain did not want to see Europe, especially the Western European region close to Britain, become Prussia's coastline, but it can also be seen from here that Britain is not willing to compete directly with Prussia. Instead, it is using the pan-Prussian countries to consume Prussia's military and diplomatic power. Chapter 611 Britain is still in its heyday. In the European Times, Herman van Perron pointed out that Britain will strengthen its participation in various measures to support the European continent's opposition to Prussia, including strengthening military and political support for countries around Prussia to dilute the dissatisfaction of countries that were originally unfriendly to Britain and take positive measures to influence it. Prussia has defeated Denmark and Austria successively, and now France is divided into North and South, which makes all countries very wary of Prussia. At the International Judicial Conference held in The Hague, the seat of the International Court of Justice, the ministers of justice or ministers of various countries have recently asked Prussia to stop invading France. They said at the headquarters in The Hague, Netherlands, last Friday that the organization should pay attention to the negative impact brought by Prussia. Prussia's actions are no different from France's previous unprovoked invasion of the Kingdom of Siam. Although France is not a member of the organization, the international law of the organization is equal, so Prussia and France are required to cease fire and use international law as the basis for negotiations. Countries said they needed to solve security problems instead of getting involved in great power competition and war. Prime Minister Charles and Queen Eugenie in Paris both nodded in agreement. However, Bismarck in Berlin refused. "Your Majesty, our intelligence collection shows that Britain should strengthen its support for European countries in the future and try to contain Prussia." Mackay Sean, director of Dutch International Intelligence, took the report that his intelligence organization had just received. William IV said, "Prussia currently regards the French Empire as the most important stepping stone for Prussia's rise to an empire, and also an opportunity to strengthen Prussia's rise. Prussia will not retreat easily." Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom and Prime Minister Disraeli must have guessed this. Therefore, the United Kingdom launched a commitment to support the pan-Prussian state at this time. In fact, this is not only to help countries guard against Prussia, but also to form a military buffer zone between Britain and Prussia. It not only earned fame and influence, but also achieved its own security goals, which can be said to kill two birds with one stone. William IV then said, "The territorial and geopolitical strategic progress that Prussia has made in the wars in Europe in recent years is something it could not achieve elsewhere. This is worthy of Britain's attention, But it should not cause Britain to panic. Britain is using the issue of the division of France to make a fuss this time. In fact, this is mainly because Britain wants to use it to blackmail these panicked countries and let these countries provide assistance for Britain's strategic influence. I don't know about other countries, but countries like Denmark and Belgium will definitely not be indifferent to the help provided by Britain. Maybe soon, Britain's influence in these countries will make a comeback after being lost for a few years. When William Ivey said this, he couldn't help but laugh and said, "The countries participating in the summit in the UK will not let the summit fail easily. Each country will at least give Britain a decent approach." Therefore, these countries did not take the initiative to approach Britain in the past, but now they are seeking Britain to balance Prussia. London only needs to successfully bring one or several of these countries into its sphere of influence. He raised his head and praised, "Britain can endanger Prussia's military power in important strategic geographical command areas, and open the door to reshape the regional structure. The influence may spread to other regions outside Western Europe and Central Europe, and even the entire Atlantic. Britain is indeed the most powerful country in the world at present." William Ivey couldn't help but think of the sensation caused by the death of the British Queen in his previous life. Even in the East, some places that were colonized by Britain in the previous life also participated in the memorial service. This surprised many people. A colony colonized by others actually went to mourn the head of the colonial country? William Ivey didn't understand it very well at that time, but after a person he knew who had lived in Singapore told him, he realized that people in Southeast Asia had different views. He told William Ivey at that time that in the colonial era of Southeast Asia, Southeast Asian countries were wavering between the Far Eastern powers and Britain. After becoming independent countries in the 1950s and 1960s, Britain had to leave, so Lion City was dealing with the Northern powers and the United States. Lion City was once a colony of the British Empire for nearly a century. In Lion City, whether it is the ancestors or the people of Lion City after the establishment of the country in the 20th century, they are not unfamiliar with the two long-lived and outstanding queens of Britain, Queen Victoria and Elizabeth II. They died before William Ivey traveled through the island country of Lion City, but the traces left in Lion City reveal the relationship between Lion City and Britain. Jesus talked about the rise and fall of the British Empire and the changes in Lion City. From him, William Ivey learned in his previous life that Queen Victoria was the great-great-grandmother of Elizabeth II. The two were 3 generations apart. Queen Victoria reigned for 64 years, 1837 to 1901, and the latter's great-granddaughter Queen Elizabeth II, 1955 to 2022. The Victorian era was the most glorious era in Britain. The Industrial Revolution laid the foundation for its prosperity and strength. The series of reforms in the British Parliament led it to successfully move towards parliamentary politics. The rules of external expansion made it the empire on which the sun never sets with the most colonies in the world. It was from this friend that William Ivey learned that in the historical documents of Lion City, it was clearly recorded that in 1887 and 1897, the British nation paid off the 50th and 60th anniversaries of Queen Victoria's accession to the throne. There were traces of celebrations everywhere in Lion City in the Far East. Not only in Lion City, but also in Canada, Australia and even Africa, there were celebrations. Many natives participated, because most of these people were successfully brainwashed by the British. Britain became a helper to improve their living, clothing and food environment. It was these that created the portrayal of the prosperity of the British Empire. In those days, according to William Ivey's friend, many natives or immigrants in Lion City had heard and seen, and even attended the grand event. At first, William Ivey did not believe it. Once, during a rare stop in Singapore, he was driven by the idea of job hunting in his heart, so he went to understand the world at that time, and later he really found this history. However, he looked at everything with suspicion, and he found that the overseas immigrants from the northern country of Lion City were actually influenced by Britain. Yes, it made William Ivey very unhappy at the time, but he also had to admire the British Empire's superb means in the colonial world, because in this period of Lion City's history, Queen Victoria would show her people-friendly side to the lower classes and elites of colonial society in many celebrations of succession that were calculated over 10 years, and influenced and absorbed them to become messengers of Britain's positive influence. Finally, seeing that the second Queen of Britain in the 21st century passed away in 2022, countries around the world still participated in the high-level memorial service, And William IV couldn't help but smile knowingly, because he learned the British model of governing overseas colonies, the Netherlands set overseas territories, from middle school. Chapter 612, Dutch colonization is effective. 1869, while British Foreign Secretary Russell was holding the Britain plus Hague International Court of Justice Summit in London, which attracted global attention, the European Times, while reporting the news, had a masterpiece on the second page that attracted the attention of many countries in Europe and even the world. It turned out that the European Times actually reported the content from the 10-year history of Jakarta after 1860. The author, Song Wong-Siang, was a third-generation immigrant from the ancient northern country. He witnessed the style of William IV with his own eyes. At the age of 19, Song Wong-Siang studied in Jakarta, the largest city in the far east of the Netherlands. In the spring of 1858, he traveled with his mentor Dr. Legge and his daughter at the University of Jakarta. In Amsterdam, the capital of the Netherlands, he was unexpectedly received by William IV, who was still the Crown Prince at the time, at the Dutch royal palace. Crown Prince William talked kindly with the children, encouraging them to become excellent believers and be loyal to the Kingdom of the Netherlands. From this masterpiece, readers around the world know that when William IV ascended the throne on December 1, 1861, new immigrant elites and students from minority groups in the Far East arrived in Amsterdam one after another. Finally, in the Dutch royal palace, most of these students received the King's scholarship set by His Majesty William IV. The 24-year-old Song Wong-Siang and his mentor's daughter were among the recipients of the King's scholarship. The elites from the Far East were impressed by the prosperity of the Kingdom of the Netherlands and greedily absorbed the rich and colorful Dutch cultural nutrients brought by William IV. On December 1, 1866, the 5th anniversary of William IV's accession to the throne, the 31-year-old Song Wong-Siang arrived in Amsterdam, the Netherlands again. However, at this time, the Kingdom of the Netherlands was already strong, especially the impact of the many arm wrestling and victories with Britain, which shocked the third-generation overseas immigrants of the ancient northern power. Even his father, Song Danian, the current leader of the Jakarta North Shia people, has repeatedly expressed the loyalty of the Jakarta Shia people to the Kingdom of the Netherlands. In order to celebrate the 8th anniversary of William IV's succession to the Dutch throne, Song Wong-Siang published an article titled The 10-Year History of Jakarta After 1860 in the largest European weekly Europe Times, praising the greatness of King William IV's regime and the achievements of the Netherlands in various aspects, and suggested that all Dutch overseas territories outside the Netherlands should establish a college to commemorate it. At the same time, as a member of the Parliament of the Dutch East Indies Province, Congressman Song Wong-Siang soon expressed the joy, praise and loyalty of the minority people in the Dutch East Indies, which was originally a colony, at a special meeting of the Dutch House of Representatives to celebrate the 8th anniversary of William IV. In his The 10-Year History of Jakarta After 1860, Song Wong-Siang spared no effort to record the celebrations of the 8th anniversary of William IV by people in the Dutch East Indies, New Guinea Island, and the Australian continent, and the entire Far East ruled by the Netherlands. In the Europe Times, his writing skills made readers imagine the night parades of floats in the Far East and the reading of congratulatory speeches by minority groups expressing their loyalty at the celebration of the City Hall. In his masterpiece, the scenes described are more lively. All churches in the Far East of the Netherlands held Thanksgiving ceremonies. The summer people held a 5-mile-long float parade in Jakarta. Representatives of various ethnic groups presented congratulatory speeches. The beaches of various islands entertained children with juggling. Various places simultaneously entertained the poor. Various hospitals entertained inpatients. Government buildings held dances. Streets were decorated with lights. Some places set off fireworks. And the local legislative council passed a draft resolution to express loyalty to William IV at a special meeting. In the article, William IV's great-grandfather William I went to Jakarta to carry out many people-friendly measures, so when William I died in 1840, Jakarta could see scenes of nostalgia for William I. However, compared with 30 years ago, the international status of the Netherlands was not very high at that time, and it was not as bright as the Kingdom of the Netherlands now. The status of the Netherlands as a great power before William I had been destroyed after the 4 Anglo-Dutch naval battles, and the control of the Kingdom of the Netherlands over its huge colonies was weakened. South Africa was robbed by Britain as a typical example. In the process of gradually losing colonies, the loose federal structure of the Dutch political arena, The United Kingdom of the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg, composed of loose capital consortiums, made William I, who had just restored the Dutch national status after being defeated by Napoleon I, very passive. Therefore, he could only hold on to the Dutch East Indies and gave up South Africa and Belgium. After 20 years of development, the Kingdom of Belgium completely left the Netherlands, and the Duchy of Luxembourg was out of reach. Prussia rose, and the overseas territories were messed up by the perpetrators. It was at this time of internal and external difficulties that William IV came out of nowhere and used a quick and decisive approach to make the Netherlands retreat on the South African issue while letting Britain compensate the Netherlands in the Far East. After that, the colonies in Africa doubled the territory of the Netherlands. The Americans opposed Prussia, and the Dutch had already taken control of the ruling power of the United States. These were all highly praised by Song Wong-Siang in his 10 years of Jakarta after 1860. Under his wording this time, William IV presented his complete 8th anniversary achievements to everyone for the first time. It can be said that with Song Wong-Siang's assistance, William IV's name once again resounded throughout Europe and the world, and William IV's reputation in the areas ruled by the Netherlands was even more famous. So at this time, as the initiator of the new generation of leaders of the Far East minority, he proposed in the Dutch House of Representatives to build more street names, building names, and university names named after His Majesty William IV in various provinces, cities and towns in the Netherlands. At the same time, he also proposed that the Dutch Parliament pass a bill requiring local governments to carry out more education loyal to His Majesty William IV and fully promote His Majesty's positive image. His proposal was actually passed at an emergency parliamentary meeting held on December 31, 1869, and was gradually implemented on the next day, January 1, 1870. For a time, William IV's popularity overseas in the Netherlands increased rapidly, which made many people, including Queen Victoria, jealous. Many countries outside the Netherlands began to study the secret recipe of the Netherlands' governance of overseas territories, trying to use the Dutch approach to make the colonial common people return to their hearts. But they were doomed to fail, because William had made many foreshadowings and got the result, but other countries followed suit. On January 2, 1870, the Financial Times first reported the results of the Russell plus Hague International Court of Justice Summit. Britain would join these countries in asking Prussia and Paris to negotiate peace. At the same time, all countries unanimously stated that they would not recognize the French Third Republic in the South at present. Chapter 613, Dutch sets up a big fishing net. The meeting of the Dutch Privy Council was held. Britain has scored points in diplomacy and gained the support of many pan-Prussian countries, but what they didn't expect was that Britain has been tied to the framework of pan-Prussia by me. William IV said to the entire Privy Council, "The Netherlands has laid a big net, but we have put the power of pulling the net from us to the hands of the entire pan-Prussian 10 countries. He said, "Therefore, this is both pressure and opportunity for Prussia, and the same is true for Britain. As for the Netherlands, we can slowly sell European affairs to various countries in the form of sales. Sell the power of European affairs." Prime Minister Thorbecke's eyes lit up. "Your Majesty, what do you want?" Dutch Chief of Staff Mark Rutte also thought of something after a moment, and suddenly his heart moved. Others did not understand the detailed meaning of William IV, but they knew that it must be very interesting. William IV nodded to Thorbecke and said, "Yes, I plan to invite the Kingdom of Spain to become a Nordic alliance, and let Spain become the leading country of the organization." Everyone was shocked and looked at William IV in disbelief. Although it is known that William IV is selling power, is it too much to sell the leadership of an international organization? You should know that the reason why the Netherlands is currently more and more consolidated in the international arena is that the Netherlands has the leading power in many international organizations and is a founding country. This also makes the major powers very wary of the Netherlands. If the Netherlands gives the Nordic Union to Spain now, will the major powers be less wary of the Netherlands, thereby endangering the strategic significance of the Netherlands? As the Dutch Foreign Minister, Hespet van naturally took the lead at this time to stand up and ask everyone's concerns. William IV seemed to have known everyone's concerns for a long time. He smiled calmly. "Currently, the Netherlands, Denmark, and Sweden are members of the Nordic Alliance. The other partner countries are Tsarist Russia, Austria-Hungary, and Spain. In addition, the United Kingdom has applied to become a partner country some time ago. There are 4 partner countries." William IV said, "The relationship between Denmark, Sweden and the Netherlands is there and cannot be changed, but after a long time, it will always fade. People's hearts are like this. William IV, who said this, straightened his body. Spain's national strength ranks in Europe with Britain, Prussia, Tsarist Russia, and Austria-Hungary, almost on par with the Ottoman Empire. Of course, the Netherlands is not among them. The power of the three countries in the Nordic alliance is still a little small after all, and it happens that Denmark and Sweden are worried about the same. In addition, we have more and more energy in the Far East. These two countries are afraid that we can't take care of the three-nation alliance, so they are also trying their best to win over Spain to supplement us. Of course, they also want to check and balance me. What do you think? At this point, we might as well part ways in peace and sell at a good price. This is in line with the way the earliest and largest capital countries in Europe do things, isn't it? Minister of Education Ruud Bells could not help but ask, "What is the price, Your Majesty?" Everyone else showed curiosity when they heard this. The power of the leader of the Nordic alliance? How much will Spain offer? Spain is willing to be in the Philippine Islands. Seeing everyone attracted, of course I will not suffer a loss easily. William IV said straightforwardly without selling any secrets. Her Majesty Isabella II has privately agreed with me to promote the two major seaports of Puerto Princesa, also known as Puerto Princess, and Quezon Port on Palawan Island to open to us free of charge. For 20 years, Dutch warships will be able to enter these two major ports on the island at will for berthing. At the same time, the port of General Santos City in the southernmost part of Mindanao will also be open to our warships and merchant ships. William IV said to everyone, "This means that Spain's southern hinterland in the Philippines will be open to our military forces." To put it further, Spain is willing to follow the footsteps of the Netherlands in the Far East and be the follower of the Netherlands. Ladies and gentlemen, what is the qualified price? It's a good deal. Indian Ocean and Pacific Coordinator Axie praised, "Your Majesty, selling a Nordic alliance to the other party seems to be a great power, but that also requires the recognition of Sweden and Denmark. Since Denmark and Sweden have changed their minds, it will become a chicken rib for the Netherlands. It is a pity to throw it away if you can't use it. Now Your Majesty has exchanged it for such tangible benefits, which is very wise. This horse flattering is really powerful. Everyone feels that they are not as good as Axie in this regard." William IV will naturally not refuse such praise from others. Since ancient times, which emperor does not like to be shouted "Long live," right? Therefore, he also likes to hear this kind of approach that makes him feel happier. William IV smiled back at Axie and said, "I have actually tricked Spain. Northern Europe was peaceful before, but now with Prussia's expansion, this peace has been destroyed. Back to the issue of the three countries in sufficient strength, Spain's joining is indeed enough to fill this gap. We will slowly withdraw our forces on the mainland. In order to maintain the power it has just gained, Spain will slowly send a large number of ships from southern Europe to northern Europe. What do you think will be the consequences of this?" Thorbecke and Mark Rudd remained silent, but the Chief of Naval Staff Joseph Carles beside them said in surprise, "If Spain sends warships to cruise in the North Atlantic as Your Majesty said, not only will Prussia be uneasy, but France and Britain will also be unhappy. At that time, Britain and Spain already have hatred. If Spanish warships circle around the British Isles all day long, London will be annoyed. In the end, even if there is no maritime accident, London will feel that it is being ridiculed. At this stage, Britain may fight back, and the direction of the counterattack is the mainland where Madrid is located. With a back and forth, the Spanish and British warships will form a constraint between the mainland, and the Netherlands will win the strategic significance of reducing British and Spanish warships in the Far East. At least, as for the power of the Philippine port agreed by Your Majesty Isabella II to the Netherlands, we in the Netherlands will use it more advantageously, instead of squeezing space with Spanish warships there." As soon as Joseph Carles finished speaking, the entire Privy Council burst into applause. Obviously, his detailed analysis won everyone's approval. Just look at the top figures such as William IV, Thorbecke and Mark Rudd who are applauding now. "Good, Chief of Naval Staff Joseph Carles," William IV praised, "you did explain it clearly, but you forgot one thing, that is, in fact, the main reason for doing this is to dilute the naval size of the Netherlands and Sweden. Let them become dependent on our navy." Seeing everyone's confusion, William IV asked, "Have you forgotten what the positioning of Sweden and Denmark was in my plan a few years ago? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, It means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 614, The Anglo-Saxons' Shocking Plan. The Royal Palace of the Netherlands, the Privy Council meeting. In the 21st century of the previous life, everyone believed that the British position in the world had weakened, but many people did not understand that it was actually because Britain no longer stuck to the British Isles, so the British Isles only seemed to have weakened their influence, but in fact the British had already spread their influence around the world. Needless to say, the Five Eyes Alliance, which consists of the United States, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand, is an alliance of Anglo-Saxons in the world with Britain as its base. It is the most fundamental organization to safeguard the interests of the British people around the world, and it is also the force that wants to rule the world. No one knew how shocked William IV was when he got to know the powerful forces formed by these descendants of Britain. No one even knew that this alliance did not happen later, but was already established during the reign of Queen Victoria. Thinking of this, William IV couldn't help but look at Bismarck, the director of the Netherlands International Intelligence Agency, and asked, "What is the current population of Britain?" Bismarck seemed to have prepared a plan in advance. Seeing William IV's question, he answered, "The British Isles have 30 million people, Canada has 3 million, South Africa has 300,000, and New Zealand has 400,000. Among the 9.8 million people in the Confederate States of America, 7 million are Anglo-Saxons in Britain, 800,000 in India, 2 million in the Commonwealth of America, and more than 1 million in other parts of the world. The current global population of Britain is about 44.5 million. In other words, the British mainland population is 31 million, but the overseas population has reached 14.5 million, which means that the overseas population of Britain is half of the local population." William IV looked at Prime Minister Thorbecke, then scanned other people one after another, and finally fixed on the Chief of Naval Staff Joseph Carles. "Look at the population distribution in the UK. If I remember correctly, there are now 13 million Dutch people in the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and about 2 million foreign immigrants. There are 15 million white people in the Kingdom of the Netherlands, 1.5 million in the United States of America, and about 1 million in other places. Under our control, the natives are still maintained at about 20 million. The population of the UK is twice ours, and there is another Dutch population overseas. How can we compete with each other and replace Britain's maritime hegemony?" William IV's self-deprecating question made the entire Privy Council lower their heads. At the same time, they had to admit that William IV's analysis was very accurate. The huge scale of the UK made the Netherlands look pale in comparison. Suddenly, they thought of the positioning of Denmark and Sweden mentioned by His Majesty just now. Ruud Bales, the Minister of Education, who was always known for his straightforwardness, could not help but said, "Your Majesty, you mean that we should continue to use Myanmar and Denmark as targets for population growth in the Netherlands?" "What else?" William IV said unhappily. "Denmark now has a population of 2.6 million, and a lot of people have immigrated to the German Confederation in the past. In the cold weather in Northern Europe, Sweden's population has always migrated abroad to find a more comfortable and warm place to live. Sweden has a population of 7 million and currently has 800,000 immigrants in North America. Denmark also has more than 600,000. In the Netherlands, there are currently 400,000 Swedish and 300,000 Danish. This is thanks to the fact that after the Prussian-Danish War, Danish immigrants flocked to the Netherlands from Germany." William IV said carefully, "Under Sweden's current climate, even with a high birth rate, it will be very difficult to maintain the current population survival. Therefore, newborns and excess population will immigrate outward. The same is true for Denmark. Since they are all immigrants, why shouldn't they become the source of new population growth in the Netherlands? Think about it, if Sweden and Denmark become a fixed source of population for the Netherlands, based on the current birth rate, the two countries can have 200,000 immigrants each year, and 1 million in 10 years. Combined with the birth rate, the two countries will contribute more than 4 million new immigrants to the Netherlands. The Netherlands absorbs them by integrating blood. This is the Netherlands catching up with the population of big countries. In addition, the Netherlands integrates indigenous women to leave a mixed-color population with Dutch blood. What's more, There have been many immigrants from Central and Eastern European countries to the Netherlands in recent years. If it develops in this way, I have estimated that the population of white descent in the Netherlands will reach at least 40 million to 50 million by the end of this century. By that time, the British will be around 60 million, and we will catch up with them further. There were bursts of inhalation sounds. Sweden and Denmark become the population manufacturing bases of the Netherlands? It's a pity that your Majesty can think so, but such a plan seems to be well implemented. So the joining of Spain will actually be a catalyst for Sweden and Denmark to take the initiative to ease the relationship with the Netherlands. We can seize the bargaining chips with the moral population. This is their forced concession to the Netherlands after I pretended to sell power to Spain. Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth II created two eras respectively. On the surface, it symbolizes the rising and setting of the British Empire. Queen Victoria's beloved son Edward VI was 60 years old when he ascended the throne in 1901. His term of office was only more than 9 years. He continued Queen Victoria's golden age and maintained the British Empire's global hegemony. When Queen Elizabeth II's eldest son Charles III ascended the throne in 2022, he was 73 years old and faced the crisis of the collapse of the British Empire and the division of the British Isles. In particular, with the end of the state funeral on September 19, 2022, the era of Queen Elizabeth II, 1926 to 2022, ascended the throne in 1953 to 2022, has also gone down in history. The Queen has experienced the rise and fall of the British Empire in her lifetime. When she ascended to the throne, the United States replaced Britain to lead the world, and the two major camps led by the United States and the Soviet Union had already raised the prelude to the Cold War. In her twilight years, Britain followed the United States and confronted the ancient power in the Far East in many ways, seemingly preparing to start a new round of the Cold War. When the Queen left the world, the whole world was in mourning. Millions of people bid farewell in the streets of London. Politicians from all over the world attended the funeral. It was the utmost decline and prosperity. In those days, Britain seemed to have a last gasp, returning to the peak of the 19th century and becoming the focus of the world. But this was all due to the good image of Queen Elizabeth II and her contribution to the independence of the colonies, which won the praise and respect of those colonies with vested interests and the surrounding countries that successfully seized power. Especially the United States, because during the Queen's period, the United States peacefully transferred global power from Britain to the United States. William IV naturally had reason to worry. In the next 100 years when the British Empire rose and fell, under the condition that history remained unchanged, the Anglo-Saxons, Britain and the United States successively dominated the world. Even before William IV traveled through time, it seemed that Britain and the United States had deliberately supported the Australian nuclear submarine project, and obviously intended to elevate Australia to the status of a global power. This was another rise of the Anglo-Saxon power. If successful, will the situation set by Queen Victoria now be successful? Chapter 615 Prussia's northward attack. Feng Shui takes turns, but the scope of rotation is in the Anglo-Saxon countries. If successful, it is conceivable that Queen Victoria's current plan to rule the world will be closer to completion in 150 years. What if the United Kingdom, the United States and the rising Australia support the Anglo-Saxon Canada? It's terrifying to imagine. Thinking of this, William IV said with great vigilance, "The great powers in the Far East have experienced decline and take off again. With a change of the world pattern, the Netherlands will also need to change constantly in the future. In the colonial era, the Netherlands needs to experience more rise. Great powers such as Britain, Prussia, Germany, France, Russia, Austria, and the United States are surging. Every European war is also an opportunity for the Netherlands to change its fate as a small country dominated by others. Therefore, in the future, the Netherlands needs to swing and deal with the two major camps in various periods to provide a safe environment for its own safe development. The Netherlands' migration to the Far East has become the Netherlands' biggest trick. The accumulation of history has pushed the Netherlands forward in a complex environment. With William IV's final decision, the Netherlands' gradual withdrawal from major European organizations will become the new normal. For example, the International Court of Justice in The Hague, the Netherlands will accept the joining of major powers such as Britain, France and Prussia in the future to form a European order. The Netherlands will use this to make the initial contribution to the peace in Europe, which it already has. For the next few decades, and continue to earn positive influence. However, correspondingly, just like the Nordic alliance, the Netherlands will therefore be prepared to propose some conditions favorable to the Netherlands from various countries. However, these are all later stories. On January 10, 1870, the Prussian army launched an attack from Reims to St. Quentin in the north. Under the attack of 50,000 Prussian Second Corps soldiers led by Prince Karl in the direction of Reims, this 20,000 French garrison was captured in the city of St. Quentin in just 2 days. Behind it was the Pas-de-Calais province close to the West Flanders province of the Netherlands, and to the west was the English Channel. Therefore, after the loss of 12,000 troops, the remaining 8,000 could only go south to Amiens, the capital of the Somme province. However, it seems that Britain is serious this time. After Prussia occupied St. Quentin, the British-English Channel Fleet boldly docked at the port of Boulogne in the province of Pas-de-Calais. At the same time, the Netherlands also began to prepare for war with 30,000 troops in Roeselare in West Flanders. Even the countries surrounding Prussia chose to carry out certain military movements at the border with Prussia at this time. Obviously, this is a move to put pressure on Prussia. The actions of various countries against Prussia seem to have inspired the cabinet government of Prime Minister Charles in Paris. We call on Berlin to withdraw from Paris's territory. If any French territory is declared to be Prussian territory after being occupied, we will refuse any negotiations in the foreseeable negotiations. Prime Minister Charles of the Second French Empire spoke at a press conference in Paris. This sentence fully shows that the Second French Empire did not give up the territory occupied by Prussia. Of course, the French government is also taking advantage of the situation to pressure Prussia to retreat. However, Prussia did not respond to Prime Minister Charles's call with words, but the Bismarck government directly used guns and ammunition. On January 14, 1870, 3 days after Prussia occupied St. Quentin, it seemed to be concerned about the presence of Britain in Boulogne. It did not attack Arras, the capital of the Pas-de-Calais province, nor did it pursue Amiens in the Somme province to the west. Instead, it moved eastward to occupy the Hainaut province, which was originally captured by the French Empire from Belgium. Because the French army fled when Prussia occupied St. Quentin, when Prince Karl of Prussia personally led 10,000 troops to the north, Hainaut province was occupied in just 3 days. And the battle was fast, but the place was too big and wasted a lot of time. At the same time, the French-occupied Belgian province of Namur was also occupied by Crown Prince Frederick. Support, the entire line east of Paris, France was occupied. Prussia ignored the threats of various countries deploying troops around Prussia and actually attacked France, angering the surrounding countries. As a result, Britain once again took the lead and publicly asked all countries to deploy no less than 1,000 troops to Paris to support the Second French Empire. Perhaps out of anger at Prussia, all countries surprisingly agreed, and even William IV did not refuse. So on the 20th of 1870, the 9 pan-Prussian countries actually formed 2 armies of 23,000 troops from various countries, of which 15,000 troops composed of Britain, the Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, Spain, and Belgium appeared in the port of Boulogne. Another 8,000 troops entered Chalons in the central and eastern end of the French Empire from Bern, Switzerland. This army was composed of Switzerland, Austria-Hungary, and Tsarist Russia. The latter, led by the Charles government, arrived in Melun, southeast of Paris before January 30, 1870. Prussia naturally condemned the international community's intervention, but because Prussia's previous behavior of ignoring other countries was annoying, and now Prussia was the invading party, Prussia's morals were untenable, so no one paid attention to it. At this time, William IV knew that Prussia would definitely choose to negotiate next. Bismarck was a smart man. He knew that the attack was over, and it was a wise act to use the various chips in his hand to negotiate. However, Bismarck's method still shocked William IV. On February 1, 1870, when the international community thought that Prussia would compromise under the oppression of various countries, Prussia actually signed the Treaty of Frankfurt with Adolphe Thiers of the French Third Republic. The two countries condemned and disagreed with the Paris government's suppression of the Paris Communist uprising. It turned out that under the secret support of the French Third Republic government, led by President Adolphe Thiers in the south, someone in Paris, where Queen Eugénie and Prime Minister Charles were located, actually launched an uprising. However, under the nose of the international coalition forces to aid France, Prime Minister Charles actually sent troops to suppress it. It is said that more than 500 students and demonstrators were beaten to death and more than 2,000 were injured. This incident was immediately spread rapidly around the world with the support of Adolf Hitler and Bismarck. Of course, the transmission of information was mainly negative about the French Empire. Many non-governmental organizations in the international community demanded that the Second French Empire in Paris conduct a thorough investigation of the truth and give justice to the students and victims in Paris. It seemed that at this moment, the wind direction had changed, and many people turned their accusations from the Prussian soldiers to the Second French Empire. Seeing this, William IV couldn't help but smile knowingly. Sure enough, Bismarck would not surrender. However, this counterattack was really good. If it happened in the future when human rights were all over the internet, it would be even more incredible. Chapter 616, The Three Legion Commanders Gather in Berlin. 1870, Berlin. What we should do now is to condemn the bloody behavior of the Paris government, and use this as a moral high ground to launch a comprehensive public opinion counterattack, Bismarck said to William I. However, Prince Karl raised a question: although the public opinion attack is effective, has the Prime Minister ever thought that newspapers in various countries now need official approval before they can be printed and sold? Now that the 10 pan-Prussian countries have formed a unified front in their attitude towards Prussia, these countries should not support Prussia and the French Third Republic's attack on Paris. Now that the overall situation of the Prussian army's invasion of France has been determined, it has almost reached the pre-war plan of Bismarck and William I. What remains is the attack on Paris. So this time, General Karl Steinmetz, the commander of the First Army, Prince Karl, the commander of the Second Army, and Crown Prince Frederick, the commander of the Third Army, were summoned back to Berlin. Prince Karl's statement is quite good, said a certain chief of the General Staff, Moltke, with concern. The invasion of Prussia has already surfaced from the heart under the leadership of Britain, and the vigilance of various countries against Prussia has surfaced from the heart, so we have to guard against it. Crown Prince Frederick also said at this time, if we don't stop the countries from forming a united front against Prussia, I'm afraid. He raised his head and stared at several people, and finally put his eyes on Bismarck, who was calm and composed, and said in a terrifying tone, the First French Empire during the Napoleonic period is a lesson for us to face. Hearing this, William I was frightened and couldn't help looking at Bismarck. Yes, Napoleon I was so powerful back then. Spain, Portugal, Italy, France, the Netherlands, Belgium, etc. were all under his rule, occupying almost the entire Western Europe. In the end, under the siege of Britain, Austria, Sweden, Tsarist Russia, Prussia, etc., he was defeated and suffered the defeat of Waterloo. Prussia is strong, but it is only on the rise. Even if it is a single major power, William I does not think that Prussia can defeat Tsarist Russia on land and Britain on the sea. Therefore, facing the pressure from these countries, Prussia's current surrounding environment is definitely a very serious crisis. As if he understood William I's concerns, Bismarck said slowly, Britain has always liked to keep suppressing the European powers and liked to balance us. Prussia has risen too fast, which is beyond Britain's expectations. The current pan-Prussian camp has been formed, but these countries have different interests and will not last long. He looked at several people confidently, and then his eyes fell respectfully on William I, and said respectfully, Your Majesty, don't worry, I have found a breakthrough. Moltke, General Karl Steinmetz, Prince Karl, and Crown Prince Frederick were all relieved when they heard this. With their understanding of Bismarck, they knew that since Bismarck said so, he had really found a way to deal with it. However, seeing Bismarck kept silent, they also understood that this was a secret. Not long after the meeting, William I left Bismarck alone. Bismarck obviously understood William I's thoughts. Facing William I's questions, Bismarck smiled slightly. Your Majesty, have you forgotten that we still owe them something? William I looked at him in astonishment. East Oman, in the Arabian Sea, Bismarck suggested. William I instantly understood what Bismarck meant. Bismarck said, the Kingdom of the Netherlands has joined the pan-Prussian camp silently this time. Obviously, this is a warning to us. If we stop, the Netherlands will doubt whether we can deliver East Oman. However, if we continue to attack Paris, we will face pressure from the Netherlands in the pan-Prussian camp. Bismarck said to William I, if I am right, the Netherlands will provide us with their insights in the near future. William I did not comment on Bismarck's speculation, but he was also a person who could wait, so he would not refute it directly, although he was very suspicious of the Netherlands' position from beginning to end. Although William IV's fence-sitting approach made him disdainful, it was the best way for the Netherlands to survive at present, and he did not agree with it. William I shrugged helplessly. Then I'll wait and see. As soon as he finished speaking, the captain of the Royal Guard knocked on the door and walked in. After obtaining William I's consent, he reported, "Her Excellency Wesman, the Dutch ambassador to Prussia, has delivered a letter from His Majesty King William IV of the Netherlands to your Majesty." Bismarck showed a little surprise, while William I looked at Bismarck in shock. The latter's calmness made William I admire him. He is really as good as a god. William I couldn't wait to open the letter and read 3 lines at a glance. After a moment, he raised his head and showed surprise on his face. The Prime Minister guessed right. The Netherlands has sent the bottom line of the British. After speaking, he asked the captain of the guard to deliver the letter to Bismarck. After Bismarck took it, his eyes fell on it. In the letter, William IV greeted William I and pointed out the bottom line listed by Britain to unify the Pan-Prussian camp. It is clear that Bismarck and William I have it in their hands, and they can finally refer to it to make their next plan. William I was no longer worried and said with a smile, "It seems that William IV is very concerned about East Oman." Bismarck nodded and said, "Yes, it seems that we still underestimated the Netherlands' firm determination to migrate to the Far East." In order to obtain East Oman, William IV did not hesitate to act as an insider to make us fulfill our promise. However, this also indirectly proves that the Netherlands is unwilling to be an enemy of Prussia. Perhaps, we can use William IV's mentality. William I, what do you mean? Bismarck, Your Majesty, have you forgotten that since Britain can unite with the International Court of Justice in The Hague, can we also use it to resolve disputes? William I's eyes lit up when he heard this. Apply to join the organization. Yes, Bismarck smiled. Instead of confronting these countries head-on, it is better for us to directly enter the internal to resolve them and defeat them one by one. William IV's attitude will be your first breakthrough. William I laughed. Thank you for your hard work, Prime Minister. Bismarck naturally nodded in response, and thought to himself, William IV, do you have any other plans? Obviously, Bismarck was not as optimistic as he told William I. The Netherlands seemed to be making long-term plans for all the current actions. I hope William IV will not put his plan into a situation that Prussia does not want to see. Otherwise, even if Prussia suffers a serious injury, it will not let the Netherlands have an easy time. Bismarck said to himself with determination. Chapter 617 New members of the Dutch royal family, twins. 1870. It seems that in order to counter the Paris uprising triggered by the newly established French Third Republic in southern France, Prime Minister Charles and Queen Eugenie launched a public opinion counterattack. In the Third Republic in southern France, many aristocratic and conservative forces stood up against the rule of Adolphe Thiers, headed by the bourgeoisie. Although Adolphe Thiers tried to establish a conservative republic, he was opposed by royalists and republicans. For this reason, the French Third Republic, like the Second Empire government in Paris in the north, was obviously in a state of chaos and disorder. At this time, the Bismarck government in Berlin announced that it would send diplomats to the Pan-Prussian countries to conduct diplomatic work. Obviously, the Bismarck government was trying to disintegrate the pressure brought by the Pan-Prussian alliance on Prussia. But no one knows how effective it is. But at least, the countries did not reject the approach of Prussian diplomats, indicating that the countries were unwilling to completely break with Prussia. Even the British and even the Paris government were the same. Especially the latter, now that Napoleon III has prepared the prisoners and sent them to Berlin. How to deal with Prussia at this time will determine the fate of Napoleon III. Napoleon III fell into the hands of Prussia, just like a snake being held by someone, unable to move. William IV thought of the Three Kingdoms period in his previous life, where the emperor was held hostage to command the princes, but Bismarck was doing this as an enemy country, which was really bold. William IV could think about the difficulties of Queen Eugenie and Prime Minister Charles in Paris. Let's establish a new emperor. What if Napoleon III is suddenly released by Bismarck? If a new emperor is not established, then His Majesty the Emperor is squatting in someone else's prison, while others are eating and drinking in Paris. Isn't that a bit unkind? Especially the regent Eugenie, her husband was treated like this, and she ruled France and Paris. Is this a manifestation of a lack of affection between husband and wife? All these restricted Queen Eugenie's big move against Prussia. It is precisely because of this that William I of Prussia and Bismarck unscrupulously supported the rise of the French Third Republic in southern France, and Paris was helpless. Queen Victoria also knew this point, so she understood that this was the best opportunity to intervene in Paris. However, the Queen knew when to stop and intervene slowly in the form of an international camp, which was also good. Fortunately, Paris was relieved recently because of the support of Britain and other countries. However, William IV thought of Bismarck's ambition and couldn't help but worry about Paris. Perhaps, the small situation can be changed, but the big situation cannot be changed. Paris still needs to be occupied by Prussia once. At this time, the happy smile on the face of the Dutch royal palace butler Ten Rudel broke William IV's meditation. "Your Majesty, Queen Alexandra is about to give birth." What? William IV was immediately surprised and worried. He jumped up and ran quickly towards Queen Alexandra's bedroom. "What's going on?" William IV, who had just arrived at Queen Alexandra's bedroom, asked hurriedly. "Everything is normal at the moment, Your Majesty, please rest assured," the Queen's butler in front of him hurriedly replied. William IV finally felt relieved. Although this was his third time as a father, whether in the East or the West, raising children was a very dangerous thing in the 19th or even 20th century. In his previous life, William IV had seen many news reports saying that in the Western royal family, a new member of the royal family with a survival rate of 2/3 was excellent. 3 missing 1? Just thinking about it makes me feel cute. The Eastern saying of keeping the youngest or the oldest is even more frightening. What William IV feared most was that this question suddenly appeared in front of him and asked him to choose. The Dutch royal family has always had a rare bloodline. His own husband and wife William II only had 3 brothers, and the third brother died young, so he and Frederick of Greece are left. Now he already has a son and a daughter. If he has another one, as long as he survives, then the blood he contributes to the family will exceed that of his father William II. In addition, he and his wife were deeply in love, so it would be a lie to say that he was not nervous. Time passed by with the ticking of the wall clock. William IV refused to go back to rest. He insisted on staying outside the delivery room 1 hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours. Starting from 8 o'clock in the morning on February 9, 1870, William IV finally waited for 20 hours and arrived at 4 hours, 10 minutes, and 10 seconds in the morning on February 10, 1870. When he heard the baby's cry, William IV couldn't help but raise his head and look at the wall clock. He remembered the time firmly. "Your Majesty, it's a prince." When he saw the new life being carried out, looking at him, William IV knew that he had finally surpassed his father William II. But he seemed to be wrong. Because just when he was holding his second son and third child and feeling complacent, a cry of surprise came from the delivery room. William IV's heart jumped. Could it be an accident? Just as he was worried, the housekeeper ran out again. What William IV saw was not horror, but a smile. She said in surprise, "Your Majesty, there is another one in the Queen's belly." William IV was shocked and looked at his son in his hands in disbelief. He immediately reacted, "It's twins." When he saw the housekeeper nod, William IV suddenly asked, "Alexandra's body, is there any problem?" "The Queen is in good health," the housekeeper replied. At this time, Alexandra's cry came from the delivery room again, which made William IV worried again. The housekeeper seemed to know His Majesty's concerns, so she stared at the prince in William IV's arms. William IV understood and reluctantly handed the child to her, admonishing her, "Take good care of him, and you will be rewarded later." This time, Alexandra's cry lasted for 20 hours. William IV was in the delivery room for nearly 40 hours, and finally came at 1 hour, 1 minute, and 1 second in the morning of February 11, 1870. Not long after, William IV had a baby girl in his hands. No, it should be said that it was a princess. On February 10, 1870, Jacques Christian William, the second son of King William IV of the Netherlands and Queen Alexandra, was born. Both mother and child were healthy, and William IV was overjoyed. He immediately made Prince Jacques the Duke of Congo. On February 11, 1870, Queen Alexandra gave birth to another princess 20 hours later, the second daughter of William IV and Queen Alexandra. William IV directly named her Marie Christiane William, and directly named this less than a day-old Princess Marie as the Grand Duchess of Kenya. Together with Prince Albert of Orange, Duke of Nassau, Duke of Australia, born on November 25, 1865, and Princess Anna, Grand Duchess of Fuquoc, born on August 20, 1867, William IV finally had two princes and two princesses at this time. The Dutch royal family members were no longer a factor restricting the Kingdom of the Netherlands, which laid a solid foundation for the future stability of the Dutch royal family and the overall development of the Netherlands. Chapter 618, Philosophers Rule the World. The increase in the number of members of the Dutch royal family, and the increase of two at a time, really made King William IV of Greece and Queen Sophie very happy. Of course, the same is true for Christian IX of Denmark, because this means that the status of his daughter Queen Alexandra is more stable. The bloodline of the European royal family is very important. Because of this, there are frequent incidents of looking for heirs from near to far in terms of inheritance. The most typical example is Queen Victoria, who inherited the position of the British king in the past. Therefore, William IV currently has 4 direct blood descendants. As long as there is no premature death, the possibility of the Dutch royal heirs being cut off in the primary election will not be cut off for dozens or hundreds of years. William IV in Amsterdam is naturally the happiest. Looking at the extremely weak Queen Alexandra in front of the bed, William IV very considerately helped her pull up the warm quilt to cover her exposed neck. "Thank you for your hard work, Alexandra." William IV knew very well what the birth of these two little guys meant. Because of this understanding, he would cherish Alexandra in front of him even more. A saying in the previous life is absolutely true: a woman is willing to help you have children. That absolutely proves that this woman at least does not dislike you. When a woman is willing to give birth to 3 or 4 children for you again and again, it proves that this woman has placed her body and mind on you. Will you still let down such a woman who is willing to be a piece of meat on your body? If you do this, it can only prove that you are a fool and you are self-harming. Queen Alexandra understood the pity of her husband William IV. She smiled and struggled to get up. William IV sat down at the head of the bed with a wry smile, helped her lean against his chest, and embraced her. After a while, Alexandra asked in a gentle voice, "The 2 children are still young, and His Majesty actually directly conferred a title, and it is an overseas territory as a title. Wouldn't this be not good? The 2 princes and princesses were just born yesterday." Although she moved William IV to confer them a title, this is actually quite rare in the European royal family. In particular, William IV directly conferred the title of Duke of Congo on Prince Jacques, and Princess Mary became the Grand Duchess of Kenya. Oh my God! During her regency, she had a detailed understanding of Africa. These 2 places are very important places for the Netherlands in Africa. Congo is in the middle part of Western Africa, and according to Dutch intelligence, it is the largest piece of land with the most vegetation and water sources on the African continent. It even caused a fight between the Portuguese King Louis I and the Netherlands. The Netherlands fought a war with Portugal and only saved it after the victory of the Netherlands. Now such a place has been conferred a title by Jacques. She looked up at William IV and said, "Your Majesty actually conferred Jacques the Grand Duke of Congo and Mary the Grand Duchess of Kenya? Is there any deep meaning?" William IV smiled, then gently rested his chin on Alexandra's shoulder, and said warmly, "It turns out that you are the one who knows me." Alexandra said dissatisfiedly, "Don't be a good kid, tell me what your Majesty thinks." William IV was not angry that he was ignored by the coquettish Alexandra. William IV laughed and said, "Alexandra, you have also been regent for the Netherlands for 2 months. So what do you think of the current governance of the Netherlands? What difficulties have arisen?" Alexandra was stunned when she heard this. She didn't expect William IV to ask her back. This made her recall the difficulties she had encountered when she replaced William IV in governing the Netherlands during this period. To be honest, there are quite a few difficulties. She thought for a while, and then said, "The mainland is too far away from overseas territories around the world. Even if there are telegraphs, it seems that there is a sense of powerlessness in governance. In the Far East alone, we sometimes face a sense of insufficient communication or inadequate execution. Although part of Africa is also in the Atlantic Ocean, it is also very difficult to govern because of the distance between the north and the south." William IV nodded and said, "Is there any good way to change it?" Queen Alexandra thought about it, and finally said helplessly, "I have thought of many ways, and finally found that it is still difficult to achieve the convenience of ruling under the nose of the mainland." Speaking of this, she suddenly had a flash of light in her mind, as if she had grasped something, but she seemed unable to grasp it. Wait, she is also a very smart person. She immediately recalled the question that William IV had just asked, and then associated it with her own answer. She seemed to have guessed something. She straightened her waist from William IV's chest, turned her head to face William IV, and pressed him with surprise on her face. She couldn't help asking, "Your Majesty, do you want to?" William IV nodded and said proudly, "Yes, the Netherlands is vast and sparsely populated. No matter how the Dutch whites develop in the next 20, 30, or even 40 years, it will be difficult for them to become the largest ethnic group in every place." Ignoring Queen Alexandra's surprise, he continued, "I spent a lot of effort and used various means to obtain the Congo Basin with the most green forests and rivers in Africa, and occupied northern Angola to form a line. After that, I lured Portugal to take the initiative, and I found an excuse to obtain northern Mozambique. The rest of the places were also taken step by me with great effort. In the whole of Africa, we the Netherlands occupy 1/5 of the land, and it is the most fertile 1/5 of the land." William IV said proudly, "France is a desert area in the north, Britain is almost a desert, Prussia is even more scattered in the east and west, and other countries can hardly compare with us in terms of territory or fertility." Queen Alexandra naturally knew this. The Congo River Basin in Central and Western Africa and the Zambia River, Rufiji River, and Rovuma River in the Central and Eastern Basins were all under the governance of the Netherlands. The upper reaches of the Nile, such as Lake Victoria and Lake Malawi, were also in the hands of the Netherlands. Because of this, the Dutch territory in Africa has always been coveted by European countries. Therefore, the Netherlands has been developing in a low-key manner in recent years. William IV said, "At present, the indigenous people who have migrated from Africa and the Far East have reached 11 million, while the Dutch whites are 40% and the European white immigrants are less than 200,000. With 6% of the Dutch managing 95% of the indigenous people, if remote control is added, it will sooner or later cause a big problem, which is very unfavorable to the rule." Alexandra trembled a little and said, "So your Majesty conferred the title of Grand Duke on them?" William IV nodded first, then shook his head and said, "Not only conferring the title, but when they grow up, this may be the place they rule in the future." Alexandra trembled all over, and couldn't help but stare at her husband with wide eyes, meeting her gaze. "William IV, I just want each of our children to become the king of a country. Only in this way can those places in Africa be firmly held in the hands of the Orange Nassau family forever." Chapter 619, Bombardment of Paris. Unlike the ancient great country in the Far East, which divided hundreds of princes into different families and ended up with a civil war, in Europe, it is rare for a royal family to start a war. It is precisely because of this fine tradition of the European royal family that William IV had the idea of letting his children become kings of various remote countries. William IV, if Jacques grows up to become the king of Congo, the Netherlands territory in Africa will be almost half stable. He couldn't help but think of Australia and Canada in his previous life. He is now planning to use his second son, Prince Jacques, to rule Congo, Uganda, Rwanda, and Zambia. And Mary, the Grand Duchess of Kenya, may become the Queen of Kenya, Tanzania, and northern Mozambique if everything goes according to plan. Even William IV has already thought about it. If there are new members later, they will be divided into new families. After all, the UAE and the East Oman that will soon be acquired are not a small piece of territory. In short, in the future, he will use his bloodline to maintain the Dutch royal family's rule over these current territories and control them. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but support Alexandra, who was already a little surprised by himself. He smiled and said, "Okay, lie down quickly. I'm going to wait for you to recover and give birth to twins again." Alexandra immediately glared at him unhappily. However, William IV did not succeed in diverting her attention. She worriedly said, "If several children are allowed to rule those places, will the Netherlands' strength decline due to division? Also, the Far East is so large, who should inherit it? What about the European mainland? If Albert inherits here, will the Far East also be out of reach? Who said Albert will be here?" William IV ignored Alexandra's surprised look. "I plan to make Anna the Queen of the mainland, and Albert will move to the Australian continent to rule the Far East." "Ah!" Alexandra exclaimed, "It's Anna." William IV thought ahead. If there are many heirs, it's okay. If nothing changes, he will let Anna use the title of the Kingdom of the Netherlands in the future, and the headquarters of the Netherlands will be moved to the Australian continent in the Far East, thus forming a United Kingdom of the Netherlands, plus other countries without royal rule, or members of the Dutch Federation. This is better than the last British Commonwealth in the previous life, which was a group without binding force and cohesion. Perhaps some people would think that William IV was making a big fuss after knowing this, but only he understood that if he did not prepare now, the Netherlands would face the disintegration of the overseas colonies of Britain, France and other countries in the past, and finally become a face-saving project to form organizations to maintain face. This is absolutely unacceptable to William IV. After being surprised just now, Alexandra reacted immediately. Since your Majesty has decided, then let's do it this way, but many things still need to be improved. For example, the population ratio of those African countries will form a constraint on the future rule of Jacques and Mary. Why not? William IV was shocked and his eyes fell on Alexandra, who was a little ruthless. The latter said fearlessly, "The population ratio must be reduced, so I suggest that your Majesty implement some shady policies to clean up the natives." Sure enough, all mothers in this world are the same. For the sake of their children, they can turn themselves from an extremely kind woman into a ruthless person who can sell their conscience. Alexandra can't escape this set of rules. However, when William IV thought of Alexandra as the result of his efforts, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. "Well, you should have a good rest. If you want them to be more relaxed, then you should take good care of your body and give them a few brothers and sisters to share their burden." William IV's words naturally attracted Queen Alexandra's rolling eyes. Watching the palace become white with the falling snow, William IV couldn't help but sigh that Europe in February was still too cold. Not only William IV thought so, but the Parisians in southern Netherlands also had such feelings. Because on February 14, 1870, Prussia actually sent diplomatic missions to various countries, confusing them to mean that Prussia was ready to negotiate, but Prussia actually chose to launch an attack on Paris on this morning. The 1st and 2nd Corps of the Prussian army pressed towards the Laval Army Group and the Northern Army Group in the east of Paris, France from Reims and Troyes. The two armies were defeated by the main forces of the Prussian army. Because Napoleon III and Reims surrendered with more than 80,000 troops, the French Paris government organized a defense on May 1. The Paris government also conducted secret armistice negotiations under the deliberate guidance of Bismarck. Therefore, Paris was cold and hungry at this time. So the people of Paris revolted again on February 15, 1870, less than half a month later, but were suppressed again. On February 16, 1870, the Loire Army launched a counterattack. In 1870, the Loire Army of the Paris government defeated the Prussian First Army, defended Creil, and counterattacked and occupied Noyon to the north of Creil. However, on February 18, it was counterattacked by the Prussian First Army and was ordered to withdraw from Noyon and return to Creil for defense. The northern gate of Paris. On February 19, 1870, the Eastern Army east of Paris, France, lost near Soissons, the French front position west of Reims, and the Eastern Army also failed in Cézanne west of Châlons controlled by the Prussian army. The war of the Paris government was getting worse and worse, and the situation was difficult and dangerous. At this time, all the neighboring countries of Pan-Prussia reacted, but it was too late, because after mid-February 1870, a heavy snowstorm actually fell. As a result, the deployment of troops by various countries came to a standstill. Therefore, Paris was facing a situation where even its friendly countries could hardly help. On February 25, 1870, after occupying Cézanne, the Prussian Second Army went straight to the east of Paris. On the same day, Prussia used 502 heavy artillery to bombard Paris, and Paris was immediately caught in the artillery fire. Perhaps affected by the fall of Cézanne in the south, Creil in the north also fell on February 27, 1870. So the Prussian First Army also sent troops directly to the north end of Paris. More than 300 heavy artillery were also set up for bombardment. Paris was suddenly surrounded by the Prussian army's bombardment in the Middle East and north. When William IV learned of the predicament Paris was in, he just shook his head and smiled bitterly. Paris, it seems that it still needs to be occupied by Bismarck for a while. Chapter 620, Legal Negotiations. 1870, after being trapped for 2 weeks, the Paris defenders used 65 hot air balloons to carry 164 people out of Paris, including Gambetta, who firmly advocated resistance, and pigeons to keep in touch with the various field armies. On March 27, 1870, Paris held its third uprising. After the Second French Empire government suppressed it, the 10 Pan-Prussian countries, including Britain, put pressure on the Kingdom of Prussia to negotiate an armistice with the Paris government. At this time, Queen Eugenie and Crown Prince Eugene evacuated to Rouen, the capital of the Seine Maritime province on the Seine River west of Paris. On the Prussian side, perhaps this time it was out of helplessness, or perhaps there were other plans. After consulting King William I of Prussia, the Bismarck government ordered the Prussian military command to conduct the first round of formal negotiations. This time, Prime Minister Charles and Prime Minister Bismarck conducted face-to-face negotiations. Prime ministers of 10 countries, including British Prime Minister Disraeli and Dutch Prime Minister Thorbecke, attended the negotiations held in Ostend, a coastal city in the southwest of West Flanders province in the south of the Netherlands, as representatives of the armistice coordinating countries. At the same time, the Paris military and the Prussian Army Command were conducting military negotiations in Paris at the same time. When Crown Prince Frederick led the Prussian Third Army to the southwest of Paris, even Disraeli of Britain was already worried about the decline in the advantage of the Second French Empire in the armistice negotiations. When Bismarck proposed in Ostend, West Flanders province in the west of the Netherlands, that all countries recognize Prussia as the new European Empire, and in front of the prime ministers of the 10 pan-Prussian countries, he asked the prime ministers of all countries to participate in William I's declaration in Paris that the Kingdom of Prussia would become the German Empire. It completely shocked the whole of Europe. We Prussians could withdraw from Reims and Paris, or from St. Quentin, or even retreat to the east of Verdun, but we Prussians need all countries to recognize that Prussia is now worthy of the title of an empire. Thorbecke looked up at Bismarck, who was at the negotiating table, ignoring the bitter expression of Charles, the Prime Minister of the Second French Empire. He also seemed to ignore the increasingly gloomy eyes of British Prime Minister Disraeli. Dutch Prime Minister Thorbecke had to admit that His Majesty William IV had guessed Prussia's purpose again. After all this time, it turned out that Prussia really used the defeat of France as a trumpet and officially announced that Prussia replaced France as the most powerful European hegemon in Central and Western Europe. On the contrary, look at the current France divided into two. The Second French Empire in Paris is actually gasping for breath, and the South, with the support of Prussia, although there are dissatisfaction among the nobles, can be regarded as a stable ally of Prussia. Facing Prussia's relentless pressure, Paris had a very hard time. Prime Minister Charles saw that his original idea of being somewhat proud of the help of the 10 pan-Prussian countries had already been shaky as Prussia almost conquered Paris. Prime Minister Disraeli frowned and said, "Prussia's current practices have made other countries feel the practices before Napoleon I. If Prussia thinks that Europe is still the Europe before Napoleon, we will feel that Prussia seems to be lacking some heat. Even if it is almost the same, the final fate of Napoleon I is also a lesson for us." After saying that, he turned his eyes to the Dutch Prime Minister Thorbecke. The Netherlands is the one that Prussia needs to take care of now. However, he would rather give the position of the next spokesperson to Archduke Rainer Ferdinand, the Prime Minister of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, who was a victim of the Prussian War. After Austria was defeated by Prussia, it was kicked out of the German Confederation. It was forced to persuade Hungary to successfully form the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Archduke Rainer Ferdinand, as the Prime Minister of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, naturally would not support Prussia. When everyone saw Disraeli turning his gaze from Thorbecke to him, it was obvious that this was to let the Prime Minister of the Austro-Hungarian Empire stand up and attack Bismarck, the old rival who caused Austria's decline. Archduke Rainer Ferdinand I lived up to expectations and criticized. The status of the French Empire in Europe naturally does not need me to say much. I think Prussia should withdraw from Paris immediately and let His Majesty Napoleon I return to the Second French Empire. Only then will it be suitable for fair negotiations between Prussia and France. By the way, I remind Prime Minister Bismarck that the international community is now discussing whether Napoleon I was abused in Berlin. I think we should also get a clear answer to this issue in today's talks. Yes, detaining a monarch is never a good idea. No matter what, Napoleon I, as the reigning emperor of the French Empire, was captured by Prussia. The European royal families should not be allowed to do something more shameful. Spanish Prime Minister Ramon Narvaez unexpectedly stood up. Then, the Danish Prime Minister Monrad seemed unwilling to lag behind and complained to Bismarck, "Prussia is not taking the whole of Europe seriously." With the Prussian-Danish, Prussian-Austrian and now Franco-Prussian wars that Prussia has initiated, the European order and rules seem to be completely messed up. Ladies and gentlemen, Monrad first accused Bismarck without naming any names. If this continues, Will Europe be subject to the law of the jungle where whoever has the stronger fist will go to war? If so, then we have something to announce. Disraeli looked at Monrad unexpectedly. Bismarck, who originally didn't care, also showed a thoughtful look, as if he thought of something else, but a little bit. He didn't seem to care about Denmark's accusations, but was interested in what Monrad was going to announce. Thorbecke showed dissatisfaction at the right time, but he held back. His expression made Spanish Prime Minister Ramon Narvaez and Swedish Foreign Minister Ludwig feel relieved. Seeing this, Monrad beside him also put down his worries. Under the attention of others, he said, in order to prevent the invasion of other ambitious countries, the Nordic Alliance will take this opportunity to inform you in advance that Spain has officially become the fourth member of our Nordic Alliance. At the same time, in the future, Spain will actively participate in the maritime and land military alliance with Denmark, Sweden and the Netherlands. What? Spain in southern Europe has quietly become the fourth member of the Nordic Alliance? Even Bismarck was shocked when he heard this. This is definitely different from what he expected. Disraeli was also surprised by the news. Spain passes through the English Channel and then goes to the Norwegian Sea and the Baltic Sea to meet the three countries at sea? Nonsense, right? The previous confrontational attitude between Spain and Britain and the hegemony between the two countries at sea in the 18th century made it difficult for Britain to tolerate Spain's rise again, especially at sea. You have to know that the purpose of occupying Gibraltar was to keep an eye on Spain's actions in the Mediterranean. In the Atlantic, the British home fleet was only accompanying and tracking. Therefore, Spain alone was not a big threat to Britain. However, if Denmark, Sweden and the Netherlands were added, it would be different. Although the population of the latter three countries was not the same, whether it was Sweden, which was at the forefront of the European army, or the Netherlands, Spain and Denmark, which ranked third, fourth and sixth in the navy, together they were definitely a force that was far superior to Britain. Disraeli had to be cautious. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 621: The Paris Agreement That Changed History. Damn, Spain joined the Nordic Alliance composed of Denmark, the Netherlands, and Sweden? Bismarck was very dissatisfied. Therefore, he could not help but set his sights on the Dutch Prime Minister Thorbecke. The Netherlands had always been in a neutral position in the Franco-Prussian War. Later, it borrowed the Duchy of Luxembourg to Prussia for a week, but made the world think that the Netherlands was biased towards Prussia. After that, the Netherlands made a sharp turn and had an ambiguous relationship with the government of the Second French Empire, regented by Queen Eugenie in Paris, and even participated in the Pan-Prussian 10-nation camp against Prussia. This makes people find that the Netherlands seems to have changed from supporting Prussian neutrality bias towards the Second French Empire. And now, it has begun to launch a more Spanish alliance against Prussia? Bismarck was immediately unpredictable about the thoughts of William IV of the Netherlands. It was precisely because he could not figure out the other party's thoughts that he was more afraid of William IV. Because only when he could not figure it out, he would have an uncertain grasp of the situation. He was not afraid of Queen Victoria, and Napoleon III was even more played in his hands. However, facing William IV of the Netherlands, he seemed to be unable to grasp the other party's trajectory forever, and lost the initiative between the Netherlands and Prussia, which had to be said to be a taboo in military strategy. Not only was Bismarck's mind in a state of confusion, but even Prime Minister Gorchakov of the Russian Empire was silent, quickly calculating the gains and losses of this matter to the Russian Empire. The relationship between Sweden and the Russian Empire eased this year, but on the issue of the Grand Duchy of Finland, although the Swedes were on the surface, who knew if they would have other plans in secret? Therefore, the Russian Empire was very concerned about any increase or decrease in threats in Northern Europe. The Netherlands is currently moving from mainland Europe to the Far East, which has broken the tacit understanding of mutual support between the Russian Empire and the Netherlands. Even His Majesty Alexander II expressed his dissatisfaction with the Netherlands to him many times. Because the position that the Russian Empire shaped for the Netherlands was that the Netherlands was the spokesperson of the Russian Empire in Western Europe, the source of the Russian Empire's absorption of technology from advanced industrial countries in Western Europe, and the middleman for the Russian Empire to penetrate into Western European relations. However, As the Netherlands has focused its energy on the Far East in recent years, it has actually made a mess of its own homeland. According to intelligence information from the Russian Empire, the Netherlands has now transferred the most advanced military and civilian technologies to the Far East. That is where the most advanced technology in the Netherlands is hidden. The contempt for the homeland indicates that the Netherlands will no longer need to bow its head to the Russian Empire and beg for help when facing threats from other major powers, and allow the Russian Empire to put forward conditions. This is definitely a strategic loss for the Russian Empire. Therefore, originally, I came to the southwest of the Netherlands to participate in the armistice negotiations with dissatisfaction. Now, when I heard that the Netherlands actually agreed to Spain to become a member of the Nordic Alliance, it indicated that the threat to the Russian Empire in Northern Europe would increase, and it would be strange for Prime Minister Gorchakov to be happy. Bismarck and Disraeli seemed to understand this, so they couldn't help but set their sights on Thorbecke, the Dutch Prime Minister. Not only these three people, but also Archduke Rainer Ferdinand, the Prime Minister of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and others also set their sights on him. Don't look at me. The Netherlands is only a supporter, not a promoter. Thorbecke said to them, the Netherlands will move its capital to Melbourne in the Far East Australian continent next year. So the Netherlands has decided to cede the leadership of the Nordic Union to Spain. So in the near future, the Netherlands will be just an ordinary member of the organization. If other countries want to join in the future, they can submit applications to Madrid. No one thought that Thorbecke would say this, and no one thought that the Netherlands would give power to Spain. Is the Netherlands so good? Also, it seems that Denmark took the initiative to announce it, Sweden and Spain were silent, and the Netherlands responded passively. Could it be that the Dutch, Sweden and Denmark have fallen out? But before they could think about it, Thorbecke coughed twice and said seriously, the Netherlands believes that the war between Prussia and the Second French Empire has caused international panic. The domestic situation of the Second French Empire is chaotic. The countries present are all constitutional monarchies, or constitutional dual monarchies like the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He deliberately looked up at Bismarck, and then said in a high voice, I think none of the prime ministers present are willing to support their royal family being overthrown. If you hope so, then you are proving that everyone present is disloyal to the king of your country. At this point, he stared at Bismarck with his eyes and asked, Prime Minister Bismarck, do you think Prussia is suitable for a republic without a king? Everyone was immediately shocked by his sonorous question, and then they couldn't help but give each other a thumbs up in their hearts, because this question clearly focused on Prussia's key points. In order to disrupt the Second French Empire, Prussia actually supported the French Third Republic regime in the south, intending to overthrow Napoleon III, the French emperor. Well, now that Thorbecke asked this question, no matter how Bismarck answered, he would face serious consequences. Answer that Prussia does not support constitutional monarchy? Well, that means Bismarck will not support his own king, William I. This is a very serious matter. Once the news from Prussia spreads, it will definitely be enough to turn Prussia upside down. If he expressed his loyalty to the system, then Bismarck's support for the French Third Republic would definitely be a heresy. Not to mention Prussia, the royal families behind the prime ministers of the countries present would definitely unite and start to isolate Prussia together. In that case, Prussia would face a very painful situation in Europe and even the world. British Prime Minister Disraeli, Austrian Prime Minister Archduke Rainer Ferdinand, Spanish Prime Minister Monrad, Russian Empire Gorchakov and others all admired him. Thorbecke is indeed a veteran in the political arena who has been in charge of the Dutch government for 8 years. He really has his own way. Bismarck looked at him with complicated eyes, and then said slowly, Prussia naturally supports the great royal family, but we do not object to the people in southern France asking for more benefits from the north. You know, it was because Napoleon III supported the north too much and cared too little about the south that the support between the north and the south was different. Therefore, Prussia has close relations with southern France. Now Prussia's support is not a problem of the system. After speaking, Bismarck looked at Prime Minister Charles opposite, ignored the other party's dissatisfaction, and put forward conditions. If Paris wants to cease fire, then Prussia needs to be compensated. Our Majesty must be able to announce the establishment of the German Empire in Paris, and we will take over the French Empire's overseas colonies and territories. The Paris fortress must be handed over to Prussia and our artillery forts, including ammunition. At the same time, France pays 500 million francs in compensation, and Saint-Quentin-Reims Châlons-Trois-Dijon Châlons East belongs to the Kingdom of Prussia. How about it? Chapter 622, the Franco-Prussian War ends, the German Empire becomes. 1870, Prime Minister Charles, on behalf of the Second French Empire government, and Regent Queen Eugenie, on behalf of the French royal family, signed a comprehensive armistice agreement with Bismarck and William I at the Palace of Versailles in Paris. According to the Treaty of Versailles, before William I announced the establishment of the German Empire in Paris, the Prussian army was given the right to march troops to the east of Paris, and these troops would not withdraw from Paris until William I was crowned as the German Emperor in Paris. The Second French Empire in Paris increased the compensation to the Kingdom of Prussia from the original 200 million francs proposed by Bismarck to 5 billion francs. This was because after the Second French Empire demanded that Prussia withdraw from France, under the coercion of the United Kingdom and other countries, Prussia's request for the east of Saint-Quentin-Reims Châlons-Trois-Dijon Châlons was rejected. However, this amount was the amount of compensation reached after the Second French Empire only agreed to cede the Alsace-Lorraine region to Prussia. Prussia's concession on its homeland was exchanged for France's compromise in overseas colonies and territories. The two countries reached an agreement that the Second French Empire would cede Gabon, Central Africa, Chad, Niger, East Oman, and French Guiana in Africa to Prussia. On April 18, 1870, William I officially became the Emperor of the German Empire after being crowned at the Palace of Versailles in Paris, 9 months earlier than the original time and space. On May 1, 1870, William I withdrew all the troops that invaded France with a newly established German Empire to the Alsace-Lorraine region. On May 5, 1870, Napoleon III, who was captured by Prussia, was released and returned to Paris for a royal press conference. The 62-year-old Napoleon III did not seem to lose his spirit because of being captured. In Paris, he declared the French Third Republic in the South to be a violation of the regime and asked countries around the world not to have any exchanges with him. Napoleon III also announced that he would not recognize any agreements signed by the French Third Republic with foreign countries. Apparently, the first thing Napoleon III did when he returned to Paris was to oppose the Treaty of Frankfurt signed by Prussia and the Lion government. On June 20, 1870, the Second French Empire and the newly established German Empire completed the handover of French overseas colonies and territories around the world in accordance with the Treaty of Versailles. Prussia's global influence increased dramatically because of the acquisition of these overseas territories. In particular, the acquisition of French Guiana in South America enabled the German Empire to gain influence in South America for the first time. In Africa, when Central Africa, Niger, Gabon and Chad in the heart of Africa became Prussia's new colonies, Prussia, with its original half of Nigeria, Eastern, Cameroon, Namibia, Somalia, Northern Botswana, Western Zimbabwe, that is, Western Southern Rhodesia, actually weakened France in terms of the area of its colonies in Africa and became one of the four major powers with Britain, the German Empire, France and the Netherlands. Especially in Central and Western Africa, Gabon, Cameroon, Central Africa, Nigeria, Eastern, Niger and Chad are connected, and the strategic interests of the German Empire are absolutely very important. On July 1, 1870, when everyone was still immersed in the fact that Prussia had become the German Empire and the Second French Empire had surrendered and paid money to cede land, so that Napoleon III could save himself. On this day, the German Empire announced that it had reached an agreement with the Netherlands and would sell the East Oman region to the Netherlands in the near future for £1 million. Despite the opposition of the United Kingdom, the agreement was finally signed by the two justice ministers on behalf of their countries before the annual meeting of the International Court of Justice in The Hague on July 10. On the same day, 5 major countries, including the German Empire, the United Kingdom, the Russian Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Ottoman Empire, successfully applied for approval and became new members of the International Court of Justice in The Hague. The justice ministers of the 5 countries signed the agreement of accession in The Hague, Netherlands on the same day. On the same day, all member states of the International Court of Justice in The Hague, including the new members of the German Empire, the United Kingdom, the Russian Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, etc., voted to pass the first new agreement, which was to lift sanctions on the Second French Empire. Less than an hour later, the Second French Empire in Paris announced its application to become a new member of the organization. This series of events happened on the same day. It can be said that this stunned the world elites who pay attention to world affairs. On July 15, 1870, the Kingdom of Siam officially announced that it did not agree with the French Empire joining the International Court of Justice in The Hague, because the Second French Empire was still occupying the territory of the Kingdom of Siam, a member of the organization, nearly two-thirds of Cambodia's territory and nearly half of the southern territory of Laos. The condition proposed by the Kingdom of Siam was that the two countries negotiated and asked the Second French Empire to withdraw from the territory of the Kingdom of Siam. However, Paris rejected the condition. Napoleon III seemed unwilling to be rejected, so he sent diplomatic envoys to Bangkok to have frank negotiations with the Kingdom of Siam. After a week, the Second French Empire announced that it would stop waging war against the Kingdom of Siam in the Far East. And the two countries agreed that France would withdraw from the west of Cambodia, and France and the Kingdom of Siam would demarcate the southern part of Laos to the Second French Empire. On the issue of Cambodia, the two countries will return the west of the Mekong River to the Kingdom of Siam, and the east will be ruled by the Second French Empire. In other words, one-third of Cambodia was ceded to the French Empire. Half of Laos was also taken by France, but half of Cambodia was originally in France's hands, and now France has returned 1/6. After the biggest obstacle was overturned, the Second French Empire finally became a member of the new International Court of Justice in The Hague on August 1. So far, all European countries have become new members of the organization, and all countries with some international weight have been taken into its pocket. William IV, who is in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, breathed a sigh of relief. With the official end of the Franco-Prussian War, although Napoleon III was not completely overthrown, the fact that the French territory was cut in half and divided into North and South was a huge surprise. Just like the United States is now divided into the United States of America in the North and the Confederate States of America in the South. With his arrival, the world has been greatly changed by him. Will France, an important role in World War I and World War II in Europe, become weaker due to the division between the North and the South, minimizing the losses of the German Empire in the early stage and achieving a different result from the previous life? And can the United States still take advantage of the opportunity to rise up due to the division of the 13 southern states, which lost the strategy of eating both ends in World War I? All these made William IV very curious. Chapter 623 Second Generation Submarine Sail. Prime Minister Bismarck has worked in the political arena for many years, so he should naturally understand that you can't catch a wolf without sacrificing a lamb. Although the German Empire also wants to replace London as the most powerful financial city in Europe, the German Empire has lost the possibility of replacing London since the day it annexed the German Confederation. William IV pointed out mercilessly, looking across Europe, the Netherlands can be said to be the most suitable financial choice for all countries. Does the Prime Minister agree? He waved his hand to stop Bismarck, who wanted to speak, and said, "The International Court of Justice in The Hague will hold a meeting in The Hague on June 20th. Each member state will hold its first prime minister-level summit there." After years of procrastination, this year the German Empire and the Second French Empire became formal members of the organization at the same time, symbolizing that after the United Kingdom, the Russian Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Ottoman Empire became members in 1871, they took a step forward to include other countries in Europe. So far, all countries in Europe have become members of the organization. At present, this organization has become the most authoritative organization in the world. The joining of Germany will make Europe more balanced. The joining of the Second French Empire will also be able to shut up Britain and Austria-Hungary. I think after the joining of the German Empire, Britain's recent dominant position in the organization will be broken. The Nordic alliance headed by the German Empire and Spain will be the core group, which will be able to compete with Britain's Atlantic strategy that focuses on the ocean. His Majesty William IV means that the Netherlands is willing to promote Spain and the Nordic countries to improve relations with the German Empire, and then go to restrict Britain in the organization. Bismarck asked for a while, and then smiled. In this way, the Netherlands can free up a lot of energy to deal with disputes with Britain in the Indian Ocean, and Britain will have to put some of its energy back to Europe to compete with our German Empire for the influence of the International Court of Justice in The Hague. Your Majesty is really good at calculations. But this is good for the German Empire, and we have no reason to refuse it. Of course I won't keep all the benefits to myself, William IV said unhappily. The Netherlands has never kept all the benefits from its cooperation with its allies. I think that although Germany is not an ally, after all, you are now conducting Anglo-German naval exercises between Somalia and the Maldives Islands in the Western Indian Ocean, but I think the Netherlands and Germany can become good strategic partners who take care of each other's core interests in rising. I wonder if the Prime Minister agrees with this. Bismarck pondered for a moment, then calculated the pros and cons, nodded and said, I also think that the Netherlands is a reliable partner of Germany, but the Allies are restricting the relationship between the German Empire and the Netherlands, which is not beneficial to their respective development. I think Your Majesty has also thought of this, but I am more curious about how Your Majesty thinks the Netherlands should cooperate with the German Empire. Reversed question? William IV looked at Bismarck meaningfully, and then said, the Netherlands is willing to provide the German Empire with active submarine technology, but we need the German Empire not to impose restrictions on the Netherlands in the industrial products market. Bismarck did not hide his inner emotions again this time, and his face showed joy. The reason why he traveled thousands of miles to Melbourne, Australia in the Far East this time was naturally to carry a mission, and the Netherlands' world-leading submarine technology was what the German Empire wanted most at present. Since the Dutch submarine broke out in 1869, the British Empire was afraid that the Netherlands would challenge its maritime hegemony, so it summoned the top domestic naval experts to carry out a submarine research and manufacturing plan in the UK. Although it took nearly 9 years, the UK has also developed submarines that meet British characteristics, but it is difficult to compete with the Netherlands in terms of range and weapon carrying. It is said that the Netherlands' submarine technology has reached the third generation and the range has exceeded 500 to 1,000 nautical miles. The UK is still between the first and second generations, and the range is still less than 100 nautical miles. The submarines exported by the Netherlands are also of the British level. The submarines currently in service in the Netherlands are almost between 100 and 300 nautical miles. If the Netherlands can transfer the second-generation submarine technology to the German Empire, then in the face of the difficulty in competing with the United Kingdom in surface warships, the Netherlands, which was originally the object of British maritime concerns, will also be transferred to the United Kingdom and the German Empire. At present, the British Empire has massively increased the production of surface warships in an attempt to make up for the gap with the Netherlands at sea and make up for its shortcomings with its strengths. Your Majesty, if you help the German Empire to surpass the British Empire in submarines, facing the German Empire, which is currently ranked 6th in the world, after Britain, the Netherlands, Tsarist Russia, France and Spain, then the British Navy will have to deploy more warships in the North Atlantic. In addition, Spain, which now ranks 5th in the world in terms of navy, and France and Tsarist Russia are nearby. Even Britain is currently struggling. Bismarck showed admiration on his face and praised, Your Majesty, this way, you can kill 3 birds with 1 stone. Not only will you sell weapons to the German Empire, but you will also use the German Empire to continue to build the global reputation of Dutch submarines. Third, it will make Britain even more sad. William IV nodded and said, I have just received news that the British House of Lords and the House of Commons are ready to review the proposal of the Clayton Cabinet government, requiring that the British Navy's tonnage be at least 70% of the total of the second and third place. In other words, the current publicly disclosed Dutch Navy tonnage is 350,000 tons, and the Russian Empire is currently 250,000 tons. If Britain wants to achieve this goal, it must reach 420,000 tons. We are just afraid that our like-minded allies in Europe will not be able to withstand this wave of British surface warship expansion. Bismarck's face changed drastically when he heard this, and he looked at William IV inquiringly. Don't look at me. I just found out that Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom is willing to support the Whig Party's proposal. It is said that in order to pass the proposal, Clays will break the previous practice of giving orders to the shipyards behind the party that comes to power. The proposal is famous for passing the general orders to the shipyard consortium of the Tory party. William IV sighed. Look, this time the two parties in Britain are united and ready to give up the gap between the two parties and work together to maintain Britain's maritime hegemony. Bismarck did not seem to recover from this news, and there was still a look of surprise on his face. After a moment, he said, in this case, it seems that the German Empire must thank the Netherlands for transferring submarine technology. So I said that the Netherlands is a strategic partner that the German Empire can fully trust. After speaking, William IV and Bismarck looked at each other for a moment, and then laughed. Obviously, at this moment, the two finally achieved a real strategic tacit understanding on behalf of their respective countries. On May 26, 1878, Dutch Prime Minister Gerrit de Vries and German Prime Minister Bismarck, who visited Melbourne, formally signed the German Empire's order for 22nd-generation Dutch submarines from the Adelaide Shipbuilding Company under the Dutch Far East Group. At the same time, the East India Company's Paradise shipyard also received more than 10 second-generation submarine orders from Bismarck. The two also announced that the total price of 30 submarines was £2 million, 50 million Dutch guilders, with an average value of £6.66 per submarine. At the same time, the German Empire also wanted to buy the second-generation submarine manufacturing technology from the Adelaide shipyard in the Netherlands, offering £1 million, 25 million Dutch guilders. As the deal came out, the world once again turned its attention to Melbourne. 30 submarines are spot transactions, so we can sell them directly to the German Empire from the active forces, train German submarine personnel, etc., and it only takes 3 to 6 months to get it done. £2 million can directly become the research and development funds of the Adelaide shipyard. Tell the Far East Group to keep investing in the research and development of new technologies. Without new technologies, we will become the target of catching up that can be seen and touched by others. However, if we keep coming up with new technologies, those who are chasing behind can only look up to us, forming a generation gap. At present, our submarines have developed a third generation. We sell the second generation to the German Empire and the Allies, which means that we are only one generation more advanced than them. This is still not safe. We must maintain the advanced generation gap, that is, 2 generations more advanced than them, so as not to be threatened. Understand? Sitting in front of William IV was the Dutch Prime Minister Gerrit de Vries. He was previously the Speaker of the Dutch House of Representatives and was a political ally of former Prime Minister Thorbecke. During the 9 years when Thorbecke was in power, Gerrit de Vries was the reason why the Netherlands helped the former pass the policies in the House of Representatives. Therefore, this person can be said to be a veteran in the political arena and a panacea. When dealing with this person, you must understand that this kind of person actually cherishes his feathers very much. William IV does not think this is a derogatory term. On the contrary, he is definitely a qualified politician. Thorbecke is too strong, and he is not like a politician, but a political bully. So, when William IV finished speaking, Gerrit de Vries nodded impatiently and said, "Yes. This is the benefit of the panacea. It is not a problem that the former Thorbecke is gone and the obedient and sensible Gerrit de Vries comes. Moreover, the Netherlands needs such an obedient person at present." William IV asked, "What is the current reaction of the United Kingdom?" It is said that the British Crown Prince Edward is very angry, but this is consistent. He seems to have formed a rhythm with the Queen to play the good cop and the bad cop, and it seems to be working well. And Disraeli seems to have stopped now. He did not put forward a proposal put forward by Clayton that the British Navy's tonnage is 70% of the second and third in the world. Yesterday, the proposal was urgently passed by the House of Commons and the House of Lords of the British Parliament. Chapter 624, The Anglo-Dutch Indian Ocean Rivalry of 1878. The time came to March 11, 1878. Berlin, German Empire. Since 1860, the Netherlands has burst into unprecedented vitality, and various unprecedented technologies, economic, cultural and cultural forces have shocked the whole of Europe and the world. Mechanical devices have become the main symbol of the Netherlands. Locomotives, gas plants and the latest power plants are widely popular in the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Whether it is the various new Dutch doctrines derived from the popular British advocacy of survival of the fittest, or the philosophy of historical materialism that advocates that the most powerful class will win the final victory, or the theory and practice of Superman worship and imperialism, it seems that naked power itself is a virtue. In fact, in the international arena, the Dutch not only think they are powerful, but also feel superior. They have personally felt all kinds of unusual forces. The new material energy released by electric current and explosives and the unprecedented population growth have increased the population of the Netherlands by 50% from 14.5 million whites, 13 million Dutch, in 1869 to 21.75 million in just 8 years. Among them, the number of people with Dutch blood has even reached the 18 million mark, just reaching 18.05 million. The number of whites of other European races has reached 3.7 million, and the number of indigenous people in the Kingdom of the Netherlands is 24 million. It seems that the white and colored indigenous populations will soon be equal. The emerging social forces in the Netherlands have made the masses the focus of public attention. The unprecedented expansion of markets and technology has created new commercial and industrial forces, which seem to have suppressed Britain's dominance in the steam age. The Netherlands now has a population of 46.75 million, including 21.75 million whites and 25 million indigenous peoples, plus the population market of the Netherlands allies. It has completed the transformation of its own economy and entered the electrical industrial age announced by William IV of the Netherlands. Not only that, the Netherlands has used its own technological advantages to mobilize millions of manpower and machinery in the new military force. The emerging cultural power has spawned various movements that reflect the voice of the masses in the Kingdom of the Netherlands. The new and old political forces in the Netherlands have established a moral hegemony that has never been challenged in the world. Indeed, this century is the century of strength in which Europe triumphantly advances. The leading country in Europe is the British Empire, known as the world's factory. After that, the French Empire, Prussia, Austria-Hungary, the United States and the Netherlands have risen one after another. All nations and peoples who have failed to adapt or cannot compete, etc. German Emperor William I, born in 1797, is now 73 years old. Bismarck's hair and beard turned white 8 years later. He was born in 1815 and was 63 years old. Old Moltke, born in 1800, is 78 years old. Minister of War and Government Roon was born in 1803. Now 75 years old, he is William I's closest subordinate. The head of all Prussian military soldier training institutions. Crown Prince Frederick was born in 1831 and is now 47 years old. Crown Prince William, William II, the protagonist of the future World War I, was born in 1859 and just turned 18 last year. Therefore, he was also one of the audiences of William I at the meeting in Berlin today. Ladies and gentlemen, the Netherlands has now completely taken root in the Far East. Now in the Far East, who doesn't know that it is the territory of the Netherlands? As long as you go by land and sea, almost everyone will ask about the Dutch maritime policy. The British Empire is currently competing with the Netherlands for influence in the Indian Ocean, and the British Prime Minister Claxton, who has eaten the meat again, has once again reached out to the German Empire for help, hoping that we can help Britain suppress the arrogance of the Netherlands in the Indian Ocean. Crown Prince Frederick said this and asked Bismarck, "Prime Minister, I wonder if it is appropriate to develop further relations with Britain now." Bismarck did not answer directly, but looked at Crown Prince William next to Crown Prince Frederick and asked, "I don't know, Your Excellency, how do you think we should deal with it?" The young Crown Prince William of the German Empire, his face changed slightly, but he soon adapted. When he was young, Bismarck and others liked to ask him some questions at this time, calling it training, but in fact they were just avoiding the question. Last year, when he turned 18, he was directly called by his grandfather William I to listen to the government, and every time the questions caught him off guard. Bismarck's sudden question again was just a surprise to him. He raised his head and saw his grandfather William I nodding in encouragement and his father's silent acquiescence. Crown Prince William understood that he would not be able to pass the test if he did not answer. Since the German Empire became the German Empire on April 18, 1870 and was recognized by Europe, Britain has begun to regard us as a thorn in the eye. At present, both the north and the south of France are developing rapidly. The industry and guns and warships in the north are intact, but the navy of the French Third Republic in the south is also good, especially in the Mediterranean. With the help of us, the German Empire, the gap between their army and the north is narrowing. I don't understand why Britain would win us over to deal with the Netherlands, and in the Indian Ocean. I seriously doubt whether Britain will use the same method to win over the Netherlands to deal with us, who have more interests on European issues next time. Crown Prince William said this, "So, we think we should choose the previous position and should not change it, because changing it will affect the whole body, and it seems that having a bad relationship with the Netherlands will not benefit us at all." He even said sarcastically, "We can even ask Britain to test their hearts." Minister of Military Affairs Ron asked, "What to ask them?" Others, including Crown Prince Frederick, showed curiosity. William smiled and said, "Can you ask Prime Minister Clayton and Her Majesty Queen Victoria, if we help them suppress or even defeat the Dutch forces in the Indian Ocean, will Britain support the German Empire to defeat the Dutch mainland in Europe and let us occupy the Netherlands for our own?" William I couldn't help laughing. "How can Britain answer you about this question?" Crown Prince William pretended to be puzzled and asked, Why, grandfather? William I seemed to be unaware and explained, because Britain is afraid that the Netherlands will use its homeland to attack Britain. If we take over the Dutch territory, Germany and the Dutch territory will be connected. Not to mention Britain, other Tsarist Russia, Austria-Hungary, and even the French Empire will be wary of us and raise the highest standards. He looked at his only grandson, Crown Prince William, lovingly and smiled kindly. So, Britain will not answer your question, because this question has no answer from the beginning. William I looked at his son, Crown Prince Frederick, and said, now the Netherlands is avoiding us in the Far East to develop its own power. If Prussia intervenes in the Anglo-Dutch maritime hegemony in the Indian Ocean, then for us it will be asking for trouble. The best result is a major battle between Britain and the Netherlands in the Indian Ocean. In that case, the pressure we face from Britain and the Netherlands in Europe will be reduced. Chapter 625, The German Empire suffers from a heavy population loss. At this time, Crown Prince William enviously said, in 1870, Karl Benz, who immigrated from Württemberg to Holland, Australia, built a gasoline-fueled three-wheeled motor vehicle. As a result, Karl Benz was received by King William I, who had just moved the capital to Melbourne, and was awarded the Knight Medal by William IV. The following year, Daimler, who was also from Württemberg, built a four-wheeled gasoline car in Sydney. The two were both enemies and friends. Their boss Nikola Otto and his partner Rudolf Diesel completed all the manufacturing of the car's internal combustion engine, making Sydney and Melbourne the world's automobile capital. After the gains and losses of André Michelin's invention of the restart tire, the Dutch East India Company and the Dutch Far East Group started a dispute over mass production methods. After the bicycle, motorcycles, cars, and trucks were invented in this short period of 8 years. At this point, Crown Prince William said in amazement, no one would have thought that Karl Benz and Daimler from Württemberg would actually create the rise of the Netherlands, motorcycles, and cars. Grandfather, I think if the talents of the German Empire were allowed to be poached by the Netherlands, it would definitely be a huge loss for the German Empire. Taking this as an example, I came up with some ideas, so I recently collected some data for your reference. Crown Prince William's methodical analysis made Emperor William I, Prime Minister Bismarck, Crown Prince Frederick, Chief of Staff Moltke, and Minister of Military Affairs Roon secretly happy, because this represented that the growth of the future heir of the German Empire was almost reaching the direction of everyone present. Judging from his performance, there is still great hope for Germany's future. Seeing their expectant eyes, Crown Prince William seemed to be encouraged, so he said, according to the statistics I collected, before 1857 to 1861, the population of Prussia and even the entire German Empire that migrated to the Netherlands was only 12,000 in these 5 years. 12,000 in 5 years, 2,400 people a year, it's not a lot. William I seemed to cooperate in order to set the mood for his grandson. Crown Prince William would not miss his grandfather's kindness, so his smiling face turned serious. Grandfather is right, 2,400 immigrants every year is nothing compared to Prussia's 30 million population in this era, but I am worried about the next 5 years. It seemed that the atmosphere he created was impressive enough. Several bigwigs of the German Empire stopped all their actions and waited quietly for his intelligence. From 1862 to 1866, the Kingdom of Prussia had a Danish-Prussian War and the Austro-Prussian War. Although Prussian territory did not become a place of war, because we fought with the two countries successively, under the participation of economic outward trade, many people in our country left Prussia. Crown Prince Frederick asked, to the Netherlands. Yes, Crown Prince William replied immediately, during these 5 years, the relationship between the Netherlands and Prussia was an alliance, and the Netherlands had a close relationship with the French Empire. Therefore, the Netherlands is geographically close to the sea. Driven by the load-bearing economy, the population of the Netherlands that did not migrate from Prussia in these 5 years actually reached more than 50,000. Increased fourfold? Even Bismarck, who was usually calm and composed, could not help but take a breath. As the Prime Minister of Prussia, he knew that a lot of people had gone to the Netherlands to make a living in the past 5 years, especially those capitalists who operated capital. But he did not make a serious statistics, so he only knew the real data now. That's why he was so surprised. Even Bismarck was like this, not to mention others. William I said with a grim face, there are 50,000 people. Well, don't these guys know that now is the best time for Prussia to rise? After saying this, His eyes emitted a threatening aura, and the atmosphere suddenly froze. Crown Prince William showed a calm expression, and said without being affected by it, "They're all capitalists. I have to say, grandfather, don't forget that the Netherlands is the paradise of capitalists. It is the place where capitalists make money the fastest and most happily." William I was silent for a while, and then asked in a deep voice, "You have mentioned 2 5-year data? So from 1867 onwards, we annexed the population and territory of the German Federation countries except Austria, Luxembourg, and Nassau. Tell me, how much population did we lose during the period from 1867 to 1871? After a while, the sound of pulling the bolt was heard, and suddenly, an officer at the side threw himself at William IV. After a while, there was no movement, so William IV and others looked up and saw that 5 British warships flying the Union Jack had turned around and were heading horizontally towards Malacca. They were moving slowly under the escort of dozens of black gun muzzles. This time, the muzzles were no longer lowered, but slightly pointed at the sky at a 45-degree angle, as if they did not want to cause misunderstanding on the island where William was. "Your Majesty, let's go quickly. It is estimated that British warships are currently cruising in the Strait of Malacca non-stop, and there are British warships sailing here at night." Jan Semskirk, as the governor of the Dutch East Indies, was almost frightened to death just now. Just a week ago, he actually agreed to accompany His Majesty William IV from the bustling Jakarta to Medan, northwest of Sumatra, the largest island in the East Indies under his jurisdiction. 5 minutes ago, he accompanied His Majesty William IV and saw with his own eyes that 5 British warships were sailing eastward within 1 nautical mile of Medan port. If His Majesty had an accident while accompanying him, it was unimaginable how big a crisis the Netherlands would face. Therefore, he, who had just experienced a moment of shock, naturally tried his best to persuade William IV to leave this dangerous place. Although Britain did not dare to go to war with the Netherlands, the battle for influence in the Indian Ocean between Britain and the Netherlands has entered a white-hot situation. Who knows if the other side knows that William IV is on the coast of Medan port? Will they suddenly come to take risks with this warship to try to take advantage of it? William IV was originally going to continue to lead this front line, but when he saw the worried expressions of hundreds of officers guarding the surrounding area, including officials and councillors of the Dutch government and Medan local government, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart, nodded, and walked towards the city hall of the Medan city government. Medan city is across the Strait of Malacca from the British Malay Peninsula colony. Which British colonial city is this corresponding to? William IV asked as he walked back. He was not omnipotent. The geographical location of Medan city, plus the Dutch East Indies, was a territory under his rule, so he was very familiar with it, but he was actually very unfamiliar with the Malay Peninsula ruled by the British. Well, even Kuala Lumpur, the future capital of the Malay Kingdom, seemed to have faded under the halo of Singapore and made people forget it. So this time when he came to visit the East Indies from Melbourne, he deliberately chose to come to Sumatra, a currently very desolate island. Yes, it is very desolate. As far as he knows, there are currently only 1.6 million people living on the island, of which 1.1 million are indigenous people and there are only 500,000 white people. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.